Welcome, everyone, to day 4 of bLU Talk's Amplify Your Message. Part of me just wants to dance. We're just going to dance.
They were dancing.
We're going to dance. And that's my silly intro dance. It's also my exit dance. I am feeling really good today because I just had 3 days of having conversations with people just like you, those change makers, those mess-to-message entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, people who have a message and want to share that message. We've weaved in their stories, how they see themselves, who they are as human beings, why they have these messages, and of course, how we can help them amplify their message. And as you, the listener, the audience, my co-host, me, we all get to learn how each of us do it differently, that it's not all the same, which makes us feel so good because you're like, how do I find something that aligns with me? Yes. For those who have never heard of, let's put the media asset on. For those who have never heard of bLU Talks, bLU stands for Business, Life, and the Universe. Business, Life, and the Universe. And our belief here is that everything's all connected. Business, life, and the universe. So we tend to gravitate toward people who have that belief system, who want to change the world and make a difference. So thank you to our founder, Corey, for all of that, who's busy at this point planning a mastermind, like a 3-day mastermind for the bLU Talks community. He's working with Lisa Nichols because she's having her own mastermind. And so there's seats next month for that. And if you like buy into one, you get a ticket for the other. I don't have all the details next to me, but I will have to bring that in tomorrow to tell you about that. We've got books, we've got these podcasts, there's networking, there's the boot camp, all kinds of things with bLU because we want to be with you. Today's a little different. So we are going to play, the two of us, me and my co-host Lisa. We're going to introduce ourselves in a minute, but then our first 2 time slots is us picking on each other, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to cry. Hopefully I'm not the only one, but we'll have some fun. So I'm going to introduce myself, Lisa. Then I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. And I'll ask you to tell us enough about you so that we know where your questions are coming from. Just giving us some context. And then in your mind, I want you to think about whether you want to be interviewed first or whether or not you want to interview me or talk about a topic. So you have those 3 options and we'll come back to it. So I'm going to introduce me. I am your host, Laura Lake. This is bLU Talks Amplify Your Message. This is just one of the events and projects that I work on, both with bLU and with Corey Poirier. I also currently MC the Experts Bootcamp. I host bLU Talks Networking, but I also host my own events because one of the things that I stand for is courageous connection. And really what that means is those of us who are in business usually are in business with a message because of something that has happened to us. That past version learned something. Now we're trying to share those lessons. But the courage part is that old version needs to be known, liked, and trusted as they are. But we tend to want to fix that part. And so when we think of our audience, the conversation tends to go, oh, just get them to know you, like you, and trust you. That's how you'll have a successful business. What actually happens is we have to get to know, like, and trust that old version of us first. And that takes massive courage. And that process helps us connect to other people. So that's what I do. I talk a lot about emotions and storytelling and that kind of stuff. So Lisa, can you tell us a bit about you? And then you'll tell us how you want to play first thing this morning.
Let's play. So I'm fascinated by your description of you. So to be continued on that, excuse me. I've spent much of my life doing things that no one ever thought I should or could do because I may or may not have had the same road to get there that everyone else did. And so going along the lines of your introduction, a little nebulous there. I'd like to say I've just been having fun, and in most cases, as a continuous learner. And so being able to share that expertise now as I'm sort of going in the other direction, right? And not downhill, I don't want to say that. But what I do want to say is it feels like it's that time to share, right? It's more important to share than it is to get out and be that individual contributor that I've been in my career. And so serving those who serve is a powerful guiding light and guiding force in all the work that I do across coaching, consulting, and the rest of it. So so yeah, I think that's probably enough. I'm quite sure you'll get more from me as you ask your questions. I'm curious about those. So why don't we start there? Why don't we let you lead in terms of interviewing and we'll take a step from there.
Ooh, so I'm going to interview you first.
Yes, please.
Okay, yes, please.
I
You're
have a
like,
feeling I have to really give some thought to what I might ask you now.
well, now you have a little experience of the way that I play with people to get to know the human being. So I'm going to start with you, Lisa, the same way as I start with everyone else. I want to say for about 400 interviews, 350 interviews now. I've asked this question a lot, and I think I'm going to write a book and do a talk on it specifically. But here's my question. If you could have other people describe you in 3 words, what would you love those 3 words to be?
If other people described me in 3 words,
No, 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 no. What would you love other people to describe you as in 3 words? A slight, subtle change there, but it does make a
yeah,
difference.
very big change.
Mhm,
It's a big subtle change.
mhm,
How would I love for them to describe me? Kind,
mhm.
compassionate, generous of heart,
Okay. Generous of heart.
fair. You said three. Fair has to come up there somewhere.
I'll add that in the extras. So some people do give me extra words, but I always take the first three just because that's what your unconscious is saying. Because
Yeah.
it's the first ones to pop out. And then we start to overthink or go, oh, okay, maybe. It's like, no, 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 no. Stick with the first three.
I feel
Because
like
I
I'm at the
know.
grandparents stage here, right? You just want to love all over everybody and send them home, right?
Mhm.
It just, it's not, it's a different phase, right? We care so much about what others think so much of the time. And then you hit a certain point and you're like, oh, wait, those are your thoughts. That's none of my business. Thank you for playing. Like it just, no, it's a different time of life to be in right now, a different season, and I'm enjoying it.
Yep. So, Lisa, I'm going to repeat these words back to you. How do your 3 words, kind, compassionate, and generous of heart, how do they play a key role in the core message that you have for people?
I would say be patient. The world's upside down. People are losing their minds. It doesn't take any extra effort to take sort of a tactical pause, take a breath, step back, and wonder, like, what's going on in that person's life that they're showing up this way? They must be having a rough day. Let it go. That's, I think, how it shows up is in what I do in executive and leadership coaching. There's no judgment, there's no blame, and there's no shame. And after 3,000 hours of coaching across military leaders, civilian sector, private sector, and federal officers, you get to that place where you bring it into your own life. Judgment, blame, and shame really just are intentional roadblocks for some people, whether they realize it or not. And so when you take those out of the way, it just leaves room for people to unfold and be who they are. So maybe that's how I'd explain that.
I love that. One of the things that I learned in an open mindfulness group is that you cannot hold the energy of being judgmental at the same time as holding the energy of being curious.
Mm,
I
true. Very true.
Oh, yeah, that was like mic drop moments for me because then I would
Yeah.
think about, okay, right now, am I being more on the judgmental side, or am I being more on the curious side? And then I can adjust myself on that scale. Where do I actually want to be right now? How do I want to feel? How do I want the other person to feel within this interaction and experience? And then I can adjust with love.
So exactly that point that you're making, and what a good point that is. There's this course that we're about to kick off. It's a workshop on this sort of thing with leadership development. And we talk in part about the tensions of leadership, right? And you mentioned one of them. And another one is just that, expertise versus curiosity,
Ooh.
right? When we are in the position of we know we're the expert, do we allow ourselves to drop back and say everybody brings some level of expertise? What's theirs? What is that person bringing? What's the gift they're bringing to the table, right? Because everyone brings something. Unless we're in that sort of position where we have to feel like we need to make ourselves be stronger, be more, whatever.
A lot of the times in this space, when you're working with mess-to-message entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, change makers, all those people, they tend to think if they aren't formally educated in what it is that they're sharing, then who are they to be the one to have these conversations? And I have to stop them in that mindset. I know where you're going to go with this, because it's like, no, you have the stories that are the case studies from which experts are learning from. But because they don't have the lived experience, they need people like you to balance the understanding of that. So just know where you come from and what it is that you add to that conversation.
Yeah, that happens often when you're working with people that go into interviews. Same thing. They go in interviewing as if they're still trying to get the job. No, you've been invited to the table. They already think you're qualified. Now it's time to just explore the nuances of why you're the best person for the position. Right now you're just aligning at the more nuanced level. But if you go in there still trying to win the interview, you've lost the game.
I didn't know that. That is a huge takeaway for me.
Good.
But I've been really lucky in my interviews where I'm not completely unknown to them, because I make myself known and network within the industry, that they were like, oh, Laura's looking for a job. You should apply for our job. And I was like, I didn't even know you had one. And then we would just sit and chat. So to me, it was like networking, but in their office versus a coffee shop or hotel. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. They already think you're qualified. Now it's not trying to win the job so much as like, are you a fit?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And if you continue to try and win the interview, most of the seasoned players at the table will be like, okay, there's not a lot of confidence there. What was that other candidate that was coming this afternoon? And it's a terrible thing that happens, but it's true behind the scenes, because there are only so many people you can bring in to interview. And at that point, if you're taking the time to bring them in for an interview, what you're really looking for is, are they a good fit for the rest of the team? Is their communication style going to add up? Are they going to get along with that one guy or that one girl, that just, they're tough, but they know stuff. They have that legacy knowledge, so they're untouchable a little bit for a minute. And, could they maybe even open them up to bring them back into the fold? So like, what's the value? It's not really about the role and responsibility. Sometimes we feel like there's a lot of people that can do that. It's the value and the impact that that particular person is going to bring to that role. And it's kind of an upside down view of things, but being the person in the chair doing the interviewing in the hiring, sometimes that's really what we're looking for.
I want to sidetrack just for a moment, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who wants to ask this question, especially as a woman. Okay. Applies to more than just women, but me as a woman, I've always had this mindset, and I know it's not just me. I personally think that I need to meet all of the things on the job list and, check mark, check mark, check mark, in order for me to be qualified enough to even apply for the job, let alone get the job. I know, I see the smirk. Like, what do you have
Yes,
to say to
well,
people who believe that?
I hear this even in coaching calls, right?
Mm.
So men have, and this is a gross generalization, let's just call it,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's what it is. It's a gross generalization. There are exceptions to all of this. But in most cases, um, the men who are showing up even on the coaching calls are just going to go for something amazing. Whether or not they're qualified, they're like, who cares? By the time they find out, I'll get up to speed. It'll be great, right? They don't even think about it. I know someone who did that somewhere who has a cousin who might be able to give me some advice. Anyway, I'm going to try it. Okay. The females will quite frequently say, I'm missing that and that. I'll go take some continuing ed. I'll take the course. I'll make sure that I get really good experience on that. And then I'll go ahead and apply the next time I see that. But when does that job come back up? Right. And so I'm not saying that all women are that way, but they tend to be a little bit more cautious about going for things that they can't state unequivocally that they can do amazingly. Where guys may not say they do it amazingly. They'll just say, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, those are right in my wheelhouse, right? Something like just kind of takes it off the table as even a doubt. And then they're in the hurry up mode trying to catch up when they get in the seat. I have to admit, in that aspect, I probably have been more like my male counterparts, because I've certainly gone for jobs that some might argue, how'd you get that? Uh,
Yeah.
I had a communications degree and ended up being second in command at two different engineering companies over the course of 25 years as chief financial and chief operating officer. How does that happen exactly? And I think it's because when you are set on knowing what you're capable of, and that includes capable of learning, you tend to pursue things that are more difficult because you have confidence that you'll figure it out.
Mm. I
At least
wanted,
that's
yeah, I wanted to ask this question that way on purpose because now I want to translate that into being an entrepreneur. So that kind of mindset is very much what happens to all of us or many of us who get into the entrepreneurial space because things do shift. You may not have, as we mentioned earlier, the formal education in every single piece of what it is that you're trying to do moving forward. But that same mindset is translated to almost everybody in that space. So now, with your executive and leadership capabilities and expertise, can you share for those listening and those watching who are probably on the far end of this where they don't even want to try it because they're like, what's the point? There's no hope here. How can you help build that hope in those who really should get their messages out there? And they know that they're just building that tension within and it's getting too much.
yeah. Sometimes it's about reframing things,
Mm.
you know, and this again, I keep referring back to the coaching, but it's interesting to me, especially during this period with COVID and transitioning administrations and then Doge. And it's been a really wild ride to be a coach across military commanders, senior federal staff, and private sector, all experiencing very similar issues in leadership and executive leadership, but slightly different ways that they get to navigate that, right? Because three different complete sectors. Meanwhile, Doge is, canceling contracts and whatever. And as a taxpayer, we may enjoy that. And as the person being Doge, maybe not. Everyone has their own space on that. What I would suggest is, if not you, who? If not now, when? Um, and if there's some component of it that you don't feel confident about it, you can fix that. Go read about it, find out about it. Almost write your own quick book on Chat GPT about it and read it yourself. Like, it's not actually that quick and that accurate. You'd have to correct some things, but you get my point. It's easy enough to learn. Back in the day, we were straddled with World Book encyclopedias or Britannica, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, everything you ever needed to know is at your fingertips. You can tune up your leadership topics or behaviors or skill sets. Go for it. Why wait?
I remember having a 1978 collection of encyclopedias.
Yes,
Love those
that's probably
things.
the same year I had it.
And then it's really weird and funny that one of my favorite books growing up was a dictionary, but it was a children's dictionary that focused
Mine
on
was a thesaurus.
see, but it was a
That's
children's
so
dictionary
funny.
focused on language. And so at the front of every letter, it showed what that letter or sound would be in all kinds of languages from all over the world, even historical ones.
Yeah.
So this is going to lead in
How
for a
fascinating.
second, but it looks like it's going to pull away. In high school, I learned ancient Greek from that
Mhm.
dictionary so that I could write and pass notes to friends in class without
Oh
the
my
teacher
God.
knowing
Lord,
what
we
we
would
were
have been
doing.
in trouble in school. Honestly, I wrote in numbers really tiny and sometimes upside down. And me and friends, we were, the nuns were brutal as far as Catholic school. If you got caught talking or passing notes, they'd read it in front of the entire class.
Yep.
So we would write in little numbers and codes, and they'd get it and say, "No, it's just garbage." We'd still get the treatment afterwards, but we learned how to do things, coding, and we got creative early and fast. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
So the roundabout way I was going to bring this in is that, or the few, but the one I want to focus on is that it takes a little time to create a language that fits for you in what it is that your background is about and the things that you like, and take that and like mold it into the thing that you want to use it for. But sometimes it feels like ancient
Yeah.
Greek because it's so foreign to us. But once you start working it and figuring out how it aligns with you, it does make it feel a lot easier.
Yeah, to understand. Well, one of the things that we routinely cover is who's driving the bus? Who's driving the bus? Because sometimes it's like we all survived five. I don't know why I call it five all the time, probably because of, whatever life. But what did you need to do? Or what did you figure out a good solid framework was for surviving five that you're still having driving your 50-year-old self around? What is that? Right? And
Mhm.
so maybe it was if I just step back and be quiet and don't insert myself, I won't get hurt, right? Okay. Maybe it's I'm only valued and lovable when I'm working really hard, like physically hard, or when I'm accomplishing 100, hit a 98, man, I'm just useless, right? So all of these things that we sort of collectively later call imposter syndrome that come in from parents, church, siblings, communities, everywhere. Um, some of those frameworks are still driving around, and you see these people in the car, and sometimes they're in the passenger seat all nervous about to hit something, and the little driver's going, "I'm doing the best I can." They can't even see over the steering wheel. And at a certain point, we have to say, you know what, it's okay. You move over here and sit down. I'm going to take the wheel. You've done great, right? But instead, we try and fight that sometimes. And instead, then it just peels up and gets louder. So, how many of those little reframed mindsets are we working through as an adult without realizing we've sort of tunneled our vision
Yeah.
to five? How do we broaden that horizon to be able to see from different perspectives and really take the helm? Because what really makes us nervous sometimes is the fact that we know we can't handle it with this framework and it's not going to work. We saw how that went last time, but we don't know anything different. So if you don't know your little apparatus is this big when your body is now, full sized, how do you get in there and change that? And sometimes it's just realizing it. And then you can't, it's like pulling the curtain back. You see the little man on the milk crate. You can't not see him that way anymore, right?
Yep. Okay, so you have a process for how did you survive five, which is hilarious. I'm gonna have to use that one if you don't mind.
Go for it.
And then to add on top of that, I tell people to pretend everything is a 6-year-old. So pretend Bunny is a 6-year-old. Pretend your job is a 6-year-old. Pretend an interview is a 6-year-old and talking to your audience that they're 6 years old, because then you want to frame things in a simple way. You
Mm.
you come from a place where not everybody knows your expertise or the language that you created, because to them it sounds like ancient Greek. Right? So then if you come at the situation with that openness and that love for those who don't have that experience, now you can start the conversation on the same page and see where they are and then adjust.
Yes.
And then with the money mindset, just to kind of sneak that in, I pretend it's a 6-year-old, because what do 6-year-olds want to do? They just want to play. They want to have fun. They want the joy. They don't want to feel used. They don't want to feel like you need them. Not in that way. They want the joy, the gratitude, the appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they're curious, right?
They're so curious.
Their minds are open to all the possibilities.
So, okay, you mentioned at the very beginning to be patient, the tactical pause, and to let it go. Letting it go was one of those things. I kept hearing it. I didn't quite know what it meant, other than like the physical letting go or the spiritual cord cutting conversations I've heard about. To you, what does it mean to let go? Because it drove me crazy hearing it. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there are several levels of that, I would suggest, especially when you just brought in like soul level things. Where do we want to go today? Which destination? That's like saying we're getting on a plane, where are we going? Anywhere we want, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I would say when there's no judgment, blame, or shame, we're able to just meet people at surface level or deeper, right? We can meet them just for who they are and be pleasant, or we can go soul deep and find out what matters most, and talk about the things that have the most meaning to them. And I tried that for fun one day. It was early in my coaching career. I had to get so many hours logged, and you're trying to create questions. And, it's going from consulting, solve now, hurry up, fast, get it done yesterday, to slow down, ask questions. This may take a while. And I'm like, this is inefficient. And I had to re-jigger my head to say, we're not trying to be efficient with people's meaningful thoughts. We're listening, we're being curious. So once I was able to fully do the tumble and end up on my head looking the other direction, I was able to ask questions differently. I went to a cocktail party and I thought, I am just going to ask questions. Unless somebody asks me something specifically, I'm not offering anything except a question tonight. I had the most fun. It was like a good, party joke. I went around and talked to so many different people, heard so many different things. I didn't know a lot of people there. I was new to the neighborhood. And at the end, so many people said, it was so good getting to know you. And I thought, you don't even know my name, but you got to know yourself a little bit better in talking with me. So that's what really had value for them, is getting to see where they shine. People don't often take the time to help people show themselves who they are in their best light. Like, who are you when you're shining in your best and highest purpose? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And when you can make someone feel like that, even if you've said nothing at all, they tend to think, oh, what a nice person. But it's like, well, I may be, I may not be. But I'm glad I was able to help show you a part of yourself that you enjoyed tonight. That kind of thing. So,
But that weaves right in with the leadership and executive coaching. Because in my experience, I found that many people in those positions have, I don't want to say quite diminished that part of themselves, but they have hidden aspects, I guess, of themselves where they don't even know who they are like they used to.
Yeah, oh, absolutely true. So that was the most favorite part of my job. Chief financial, chief operating officer. You can't hold both those titles once you hit a certain point in a firm's trajectory, but up to 10, 20 million. So that's just off the top of my head. Someone might hear that and say, what? That's just in Lisa's head. Never mind if you feel differently. But I think up to that point, you could probably handle both those positions. But past that, you really need those roles to be separated. I frankly don't know how you would do one without the other, because I've just always had to do both. starting with small, 1.8 million and rising up through, and but on staff growing through all of that.
Yep.
I think the part I loved the most was seeing the potential and seeing what sort of growth that particular person or team might need to really hit fulfillment on that. And frankly, I stubbed my toe a few times. I wished I'd had a coach. There were some things I learned by doing and saying, oh, could have gone better on that one, But at the time, no one else had a better idea, and we did the best we could. We got through it. We did well in the end. But at the same time, I learned a lot of lessons, some the easy way and some the hard way. But they were all meaningful. And I think going into leadership development right now, I'm having a lot of fun with it because on the one hand, I'm training the trainers, right? Coaching the coaches up and getting them through certification and executive coaching and so on, which I've just launched. There's also how do we meet in the middle? What's going on right now is this bridging, right? So I've partnered up in this workshop coming up with Alia Newhall, who's just this smart 30-year-old which none of my business to say her age. Sorry, Alia. But she's an industrial psychologist. She's very, very sharp and used to being in a leadership role even at 30. And so I say that because I'm at 60. So we're both bookends of the leadership spectrum. And this whole workshop that we're putting together is kind of about I typically play in the executive and leadership pool, and she's in the aspiring leader and creating future work. How's that going to look? And so we've combined our talents in this creative effort, and we're having a lot of fun with it. I'm having fun because it's like, okay, so this is the new generation of leader, and this is how they do it. And so to the extent possible, while we may use training material I have, I'm saying, what are your thoughts? How do you want to tackle this? And she has some great ideas and looks at things from slightly different angle. And I think oftentimes what we hear is we can't get along, right? There's too much of a gap, and these kids don't have this and they don't have that. And it's like, well, some of them don't. And the reason they don't is because they didn't grow up on the same planet, right? They don't have the same level of early responsibilities, challenges, and whatnot. So I think being able to work the variety of that spectrum and now working with someone else to sort of collectively say, okay, so what does this generation need? Is it decision making? Is it around understanding communication styles? When we start to reframe delegation as professional development, it's like, oh, now I'm able to hand the task off, right? So how do we navigate some of the nuances that are really important to each of the different generations? And you can't just say, well, that doesn't matter because this generation didn't think so. That doesn't work, right? We have to honor people for who they are and meet them where they are and bring them forward from there. And so at this point, I'm having fun. I'm really just enjoying every aspect of it, whether I'm dropped in to, help a team that's in peril on a really critical strategic initiative or one-on-ones, whatever it is, it's fun finding solutions.
Nice. So, Lisa, we're at the time in your interview where I want to know where to find you and your favorite way to communicate.
Well, my website or LinkedIn are probably the two that I direct to most often, and that's www.ccpathways.com and LinkedIn, Lisa J. Curavilla. And frankly, if you're trying to get hold of me, probably email and text is probably the fastest. So
Okay.
I don't think we put those things out there quite that broadly, but on the website, there's all the ways to get in touch with me.
Yeah. So I like to hold space at the end of an interview just in case there's something on your mind or in your heart that you feel like you need to share. So what would you love to leave people with?
The difference between anxiety and excitement is breath. When you're feeling overwhelmed, and so many people are these days, just sit back, roll your shoulders back, and take a deep breath. Very often these days, the typical coaching session now includes an element of breathing,
Yep.
sometimes even guided meditations. It's just what do we need in that moment? Some of these people are forward in hot zones. Some of them are in the hot seat. So many federal agents getting retired before they anticipated that, thousands really. And so some of this is actually happening in real time, and we're still talking and coaching some of these people. And so there's a lot of flux, let's call it, right now. And no one really knows what it looks like when it's done because it's not done yet. So it's assessing the meal while it's being cooked as opposed to being able to taste it. So I think all we can really do is kind of hold that space for what does the person need in this moment, and allow yourself to be where you are. If you're feeling a certain kind of way, you have to feel it to heal it.
Mm. We've been talking a lot about healing this week, mostly because I had an epiphany a couple weeks ago when I was visiting Shelley and Corey's Kamala lady. She and I had some deep conversations, which is why I love her so much. Like, she's the one that I'm like, you're going to make me see the deeper part of myself, which I do for other people, but nobody does it for me. Rarely people do it. So we had this conversation, and what came out of it was I was thinking of healing as trying to constantly clean a public bathroom. It's near impossible to just always keep it perfectly clean. So why am I spending all of this effort staying in that public bathroom going, oh, somebody used the counter, and wiping the counter? So like, no. I can literally spend all of my time there, but nothing's going to change if I do that.
Yeah.
So then my mind was like, oh, we don't have to stay there. We can let go. Bringing that back up of some of those tasks, some of that energy. Now all of a sudden I have this abundance of energy that I didn't have before that I'm putting into the projects that were important to me, and I'm getting things done.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really good. I could
So
hear the excitement come across.
I know. So you're talking about executive and leadership and coaching, being able to understand and distribute, or even what's the word? Delegate your energy and tasks. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
And when done specifically with that person's professional development in mind, because instead of just sitting them on the bench, right? Oh, this person can't get it done, forget it. No, let's just go over here and overwhelm the overwhelmed because we know they'll get it done even if they stay late. But this bench sitter over here gets to just pine away thinking, well, they're not going to give me that. They know I can't match. No, what if we broke apart of it all? What if we figured out where they were cognitively and gave them pieces and parts to build them to where they need to get to? Then we have another strong player on the team.
Amazing. I love it. So, Lisa, I want to say thank you for allowing me to interview
Thank
you.
you.
And at this point, I'm going to call the main part of the interview an official close. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah. So at this point, what I usually do with people, and this is like training for you for the rest of the day, is I like to take the last few minutes and just reflect on the conversation that we had. So I'll ask you first, what is something that stood out to you during our conversation this morning?
Well, courageous connector that you are. I found that to be a really interesting turn of phrase, and I'm curious to learn more about that when we get to the next segment. So I really enjoyed that. I love your sort of metaphor and analogy capacity to just bring things up that are so easy and simple to see, like cleaning a public bathroom and the recognition that it's never ending. You could be there all day and still accomplish the same exact amount, or you could just leave and, put your energy elsewhere. So, yeah, I enjoy the way you can work with words.
It's because my mind works in movies. And if you don't give me the information to start creating a movie, I cannot follow along very well with what you're trying to tell me. So then,
who's the protagonist?
I know, it's like I need context so that I can set the scene. And then I add little props, and then the props start dancing in my head.
Yeah, there you go.
So then when I'm sharing analogies, I'm just sharing the motion picture that's in my mind.
We're too alike. It's funny.
So one of
I
the
usually
things,
don't share out loud how all that goes, though.
oh
So
no, not all of
love
it.
how you're explaining it for everyone.
Yeah. But usually it's like half a second of a thought. And then I go, my husband knows by now that when I just out of nowhere start to laugh, he's like, okay, what was the hour-long thing that led up to that one? And then I try to tell him in 5 minutes all the pieces that connected to get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
our
so,
brains work differently, don't they?
yeah. So there was a couple things that stood out to me. I really liked that you said blame, shame, and judgment. They have no place in being a leader. And when you think about it, you're like, oh, it's totally logical. But, and how many times do we see it?
All day long.
All the time. And it may not be constant, it may just be a choice in the moment. But even that choice in a moment makes us feel as though
Yeah.
should we be questioning this person as a leader? Like, do I actually want to follow them? They're judging me right now when I thought
Absolutely.
they were a really sweet person. And they may be a really sweet person.
Hmm.
But then you also come in and you help them to see those pieces. So that relationship between the leader and, I'm going to use followers for lack of a better term right now, or
Yeah.
team, you can shift that relationship into something that grows and learns versus, I'm never going to work with you again because in one moment you made me feel judged.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best quotes I think I've ever heard on that point you just made is um, don't judge my book by the chapter you walked in on. I
Oh,
love that. I love that. And it's just so true. I've met clients that were, the first day I met them, were in a space that was so challenging, and my heart just went out to them because of the circumstances.
yeah.
And even as a coach, no judgment, blame, or shame. Part of the rules of, the uniform I wear to work, I specifically make sure that those are nowhere in the room ever.
Mm,
But after some time, when you do meet someone under very critical circumstances, you can also, in the back of your mind, have that quiet thought like, are they okay? Is that still, kind of an issue for them? And when you see that transition and they come and they're fully lit up and engaged, and
yeah.
you realize, yeah, no, that was just a chapter. That was a page in a chapter. That wasn't even a chapter for this person. They're so high performing and high functioning. And yet, when you can have any level of support for those people, they have a cascading impact on an entire organization because you're working with the most senior leaders.
Yeah.
So, whatever work they do on themselves is a direct benefit to anyone who works with them. So that feels good. That feels like there's purpose involved in the work.
Awesome. That makes me want to dance.
Yes,
Today's a dancing day.
absolutely.
Let's just make it a dancing day. So then at this point, it's our next interview slot. Did you mention that you wanted to interview me?
I do. I do. I
Okay.
do. I have many, many questions.
Okay. Okay. Then go ahead. I am listening. I am all yours.
So give me my, all right, buddy. Good job. Sorry, we're going to introduce Odin, the
Ooh,
bodyguard, who's at the door protecting us from Amazon. So he's now finished. Thank you. Sorry
I
about
didn't even
that.
hear him.
Oh, okay. It was pretty loud on my end. So um, curious how an architect becomes an amazing podcaster. How does that work?
Ooh, okay. So I have to correct your terminology there. I was
Student
never
of
an
architecture.
architect, but I was a designer. So I did go to
Okay.
school. I took engineering, and then from engineering, I did go into architectural drafting. But the original plan was to become an architect until I found out that my schooling plan taking architecture meant that I did not learn computer-aided drawing.
Oh,
That's what I said. I was like, wait, what?
that
No,
doesn't make
they
any
had
sense.
drafting and they gave you like conceptual design work and a lot of history with it, but they did not teach you in the program how to use a computer to draw plans. That's what I wanted to.
Even, wow. Yeah, because even now that's old technology, right? It's all three-dimensional modeling with inputs and
Yes. Oh, even so when I
all
learned
graphics.
the drafting program that we used, it was called AutoCAD
Hmm.
at the NSCC through college. I went into the industry and I never used AutoCAD. I used a 3D modeling software called
Yeah,
Vectorworks,
yeah.
which also did 2D plans, but it was Mac based. So I'm like, now I have to learn a new computer system on top of a new
That's so
program,
hard.
on top of a new style of designing so that we could easily pull the 2D plans into 3D. And then once I got out of architecture, that's kind of when it started going into BIM. So the
Yeah.
building materials and all that. And now you're creating everything in 3D and then just slicing it for plans. That's a whole other ballgame. I don't really know anything about that.
So we were well into BIM and yeah, that was a crazy transition because there was so much more complexity involved instantly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I missed all that.
So enough about that. So what is one thing, just one thing, you always thought was going to be true about your future and later learned wasn't?
Ooh. If we're talking elementary school, even early high school, I thought that I would die alone. That is a belief that I held for as long as I can remember.
That just landed on my heart with a thud.
Hmm. I was always ambitious. I was always the weird one. I was always like liked, but not like super liked. If you get what I mean, like you have lots of
Yeah.
friends, but you're not part of the popular group, like that kind of same dynamic. It's like people like you, but are you best friends with a whole lot of people? Not really.
Mhm.
So like I was easy to get along with, but did they see me as their number one? And you know what I realized why that happened? I was denying who I was. I was people pleasing. I was a perfectionist. I was a very high achiever. How
Mhm.
could I be as safe as possible by doing all the things that people wanted of me? And so then I started to question, well, who am I? And really, in the last few years, has been the first time I've been able to answer that question since
And who are you?
then. If we go back to that question I ask everybody, this is the reason why I asked that question, is because I was going through, how do I identify myself? How do I describe myself? Not just for a bio, but how do I want other people to see me? How do I want my future version to exist today? And I came up with 3 words. I want to
Okay.
be seen as a playful luminary change maker. And so every
Love
day
that.
I lean more and more into that description. And my expression of that description may change. But I wanted those words, one specifically, because if we go into those words like I do with everybody else, the playful part is I went from doing sustainable architecture to specifically design buildings for human habit. So I
Mhm.
wanted the psychology behind the design. And that's how I designed, all the way from landscape design into interior design and engineering and all of it. I was a part of all of it. I took those skills into working with entrepreneurs because I lost my job. We talked about the interviews earlier about people saying, oh, Laura's looking for a job, and then them telling me about positions, me chatting with the people I already knew, and then getting all of those positions, only to have the economy at the time be in a pause. And so you know this, the only time engineering and architecture is having a bad year is when there's a pause, which means nobody is spending money. The economy is up, people spend money. If the economy is down, the government spends money. So no matter what, you're generally fine, except for in the pause. So that's what was happening. And so I had to go back to that old version of me who thought that she knew who she was. Heh, heh, heh. Boy, did I not. But I went back to the habits that I used to have. And I would ask, what did I used to do to feel happy? What did I do to express myself? And so it led into this conversation of mental health with entrepreneurs. We'll go into a little side note here. Before COVID, the general population suffered from things like depression, anxiety, PTSD. About 1 in 5 of us suffered from mental health issues, the general public. Service providers and veterans, the ones that generally have the conversation about mental health and PTSD, were 1 in 3. Where do you think entrepreneurs stood on that scale?
100%. Yeah.
Before COVID, this was a 2019 study, it was 1 in 2.
Wow.
After COVID, like the gist of COVID, so probably 2023 at this point, early 2024, the numbers started coming out. The general population was 1 in 3. I don't know where the other numbers are because I don't know if they studied them specifically. But I'm like, if the general population got that intense, where are the entrepreneurs? So I switched and I took all that knowledge of architecture and human habit and psychology and I put it into supporting people just like you and me, who are the ones supporting life through this transition because we're the risk takers. We're the change makers.
Yeah.
Who has the answers? Us. Do we have them perfected yet? No, but that's why we need your help. So the playful came out because I talk about heavy things. I balance that with my playfulness. I used to hide that playfulness.
I love that.
Because in corporate, that playfulness was seen as childish and naivety.
I never saw it that way. But yes, I imagine I know plenty of people who, when you said that, I thought, yep, they would.
Yep. Well, so, also remember a woman being in a 60-year-old white man industry. I wasn't allowed to show my shoulders. I wasn't allowed to have hair dye that didn't quite come out from a Halloween costume, like all the stuff and things. I was supposed to wear a suit or a dress, and I was like, this is not me. But I did it because that's what I thought people wanted, so that I could feel safe. So that's the playful stuff.
So how old were you when you learned that in order to be respectable, you had to dress a certain way?
That part, I guess that goes back a little bit. It shifted over the years. When I was a kid, my mom was a dressmaker. She worked in a bridal shop. We sewed and made our own clothes. So she made her clothes matching mine. It was the 80s. That's what she did. Like polka dot jumpsuit.
Remember, no judgment, blame, or shame here.
One of my favorite family photos. Blue and white polka dot jumpsuit with like the V-neck lace, bangs all curled as bulgy as you can get. Like, I love that photo. It's horrible. I love it. So I went from that into dressing how I wanted to dress because mom always made me dress like her for photos because it was easier for material. I totally get it. We grew up poor. You use the same material. You just do what you can with it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm going to dress how I want. And I dressed really weird. I really did. It was like, what am I putting on today? I never wore dresses. And if I wore dresses, I wore pants underneath. Because I did not see myself as the feminine, the girly version. I was very much a tomboy growing up. While I liked the fashion, I wanted to play in mud and play with dinkies and go hunting and fishing and like all the stereotypical guy stuff.
Yeah.
But then when I got into architecture and engineering, it feels as though they are demanding a look from you or they treat you like a child. I remember one day in the office, there was a gentleman who worked with us, and he was like, "Do you even know what a brick is?" And I'm like, "Oh." Shortly thereafter, he was fired.
Yeah.
Not because of that comment, but just because of the mindset that he had toward different things like me, like projects, like the inner office was not great. So he was like, goodbye. But many people in the industry did teach me as though I was fresh out of high school, even though I was in the field for 15 years. Mm-hmm. Until
Yeah.
you work, and then you get to know
Taking
people.
down those barriers, right? Taking down those walls.
Yeah.
I mean, did you grow up in a house with siblings?
I have an older brother. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had that to balance a little bit, knowing they're really not an entirely different species. Some of the magic wears off when we have siblings, is what I'm getting at, right? I have
Yeah.
three brothers and a sister, and I think we have that advantage, right? We have that little superpower. We know guys really are guys, and they know that girls really are just girls,
Yeah.
as opposed to there's this mystique, right? I know some friends, they're only children, and guys are this big mystery thing. It's like, okay, they definitely have their mysterious parts like we do, but they're just guys, like we're just girls, it's not that magical. And also they can demonize them pretty quickly when they
Yep.
don't understand, right? We demonize what we don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
rapid fire. But when we do understand, we can also be like, well, they're probably just being, trying to be this or trying to be that. We could be
Yeah.
more understanding. But in industry, yeah, it's made a lot of change though. Would you agree?
It has. Yes. Well, when I
Talking
was
about
an
the
engineer,
80s. Yeah, go
usually
ahead.
there'd be about 10, maybe 20% females. But in my engineering class, it was 50-50.
Wow.
That's what they
That's
said.
a remarkable shift.
And this was 20 years ago.
That is remarkable
Over 20. Yeah. It's
because
over
it's
20
not
years.
like that even now in many places.
Yeah.
One of the threads I want to pull on is you talked about bringing that work and that study and those things that you've done into what you do now. And I can see that, right? Because the design thinking, going from concept to planning and design and execution and ultimately construction and so on. Um, So all of those same things really do apply in so much of what we do, whether it's designing buildings or businesses or relationships or
Mhm.
service delivery models. It really is about that natural design. So what would you say about that?
One of the things I thought going through university was, why am I here? Because halfway through the year, that's when I found out that architecture doesn't have the drafting that I wanted. I'm like, then why am I here? And so I kind of wasted the second half of the school year just helping other people and doing the bare minimum. So no, I did not end the year on a good note with my grades. I was second last in the class by the end of this. Okay.
What do they call the doctor who ends up last in his class?
I don't know. A doctor?
Doctor.
Yeah. It,
So, yeah.
it went from that to me going to the NSCC, finishing second in the school, and realizing that all of the skills that I had learned in engineering completely prepared me and more for what it was that I was going to do next. And all of the skills that I had were transferable.
Hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that can come together in ways that could never be designed,
Yeah.
in my mind,
So
right?
when I left architecture, I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, it's not a waste. All of my skills are transferable. The question is, how do I see the patterns within my skills aligning with the
Mm,
direction that I want to go, the way that I want to do it?
yeah.
That's the hard part.
And how have you done that?
A few transitions over the last 10 years, but I have
Yeah.
been sticking with the courageous connection thing for 4 years now. And that is the longest that I had held on to anything. And what I'm seeing in the last 2 years, because 2 years of it was me not knowing where I'm going to be living. All the chaos of technically being homeless for 4 months, like just, it was a mess. At this point, what I'm seeing is because I've been in this niche and I understand and I bring in my skills from everywhere, I'm seeing everything connect. I'm seeing the core of the patterns of every experience that I have. And so I've taken that same framework, and that's what courageous connection is. We talk about the emotions behind the stories, because what is the pattern there? There is a pattern. You might just not be able to see it because you're in it. And then if we focus on the emotions, now all of a sudden we're taking away the fluff data and getting to the core of it. Because you and I both, like with the engineering background, how can I be productive and efficient with my questions, with my work, with my energy?
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, what is the biggest takeaway from being homeless for 4 months? That's a long time. It's a short time. It's a long time. What is your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I worded as technically homeless because I did have a roof over my house or over my head, but it changed.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. It was like, I didn't have a home. There was nowhere for me to tell people to come visit next month. So I stayed with a friend, my whole family. We got rent-evicted. Yay, end of COVID stuff. We get rent-evicted. We moved in with a friend until my daughter finished school, which is like a month and a half. Then my daughter and I moved to my parents, but my husband still lived in the city. We were an hour and a half away from each other, and he would come over and visit every 2 weeks. And then we only got to see him for a day because he works 6 days a week.
Difficult times.
But we chose this because we could either go and pay double the amount of rent somewhere else in one of the crappiest places to live, or we could be technically homeless, complete with air quotes. I want to make sure that there's a distinction between the unhoused and me saying that I was technically homeless, because it's not the same lifestyle, and I do understand that, and so I want to kind of but then after living with my mom, my daughter moved back to the city with my husband, with the friend, and I stayed with my mom. And then I moved into the house that we finally bought because we had chosen to live different places and be technically homeless. We could save money to help us buy a house. So we took the short-term pain, knowing that the long-term would be fine. We just didn't have a date on what that would be. We had to play by ear, literally within 4-hour windows.
So you were strategic.
And
that's what we would say there.
Just a spiral. Yeah.
You underwrote the risk of short-term pain for long-term gain.
But we talked about it as a family. And with our daughter being 13 at the time, we were like, okay, here are our options. You're adult enough now to help us make a decision where you feel comfortable. If we choose this, here's what it's going to look like. Here's the discomfort here. If we choose this, here's what it's going to look like. Here's the discomfort here. Which are you willing to go through? Because this is better in the long term, but it really sucks in the short term. So if you can make it through the suck, then we're going to have a better lifestyle. And that's what she chose. And we were full on it because we knew that it would disrupt her life the most.
And team forward, everyone stayed on board?
Everyone stayed on board. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Because I was to the point where I would get sharp pains where I couldn't breathe or couldn't move. I had anxiety attacks again for the first time in like 2 decades or a decade. Yeah, it was intense. My body was falling apart. And then my daughter was falling back into depression. My husband had already been there. I was kind of going there too. Like we knew what would happen.
So you used the future outcome to drive and look back at your current moment as if it was the past to say, this is what we're driving for, to stay on mission, right?
Yep. Yep.
So good for you. So what's your biggest takeaway? What did you learn through all of that?
Sometimes it takes major risk in order to get out of the slump that you're in or the feeling of being stuck. And on top of that, in those moments, this is where you see where your support actually is. Not on the good days, but on those really crappy days. Who is it that actually believes in you? Who is it that's going to cheer you on when you haven't said boo to them in forever?
Yeah.
And just when you think that somebody doesn't love you or that, some sort of relationship is ending, and then they swoop in and they're like, I got you. Oh, such a good feeling, especially those ones that you hope. So I'm thinking of like close family, close friends, that kind of stuff, not just like distant cousins or associates, but yeah, it's the best thing that we ever did.
What does it mean to you at this point in terms of your relationship with your daughter? I have to imagine that there is a bond between the three of you having sort of gone through that life trial together.
Yep. We are the
What did
closest
you
that we
say?
have ever been.
Mm,
That year, so it took a year when we found out from the landlord. He was trying to kick us out in 2 weeks. And we were like, we have rights, so no. And we got it to the point where we had until the end of our yearly lease. And so we had a year. And that whole year we spent planning, talking, figuring things out, having that space mentally, physically, with other people and relationships to make sure that this was done in a way that was more supportive instead of us all spiraling. Because there were 3 days where we didn't eat. All three of us didn't eat. We were that upset. And
those
there were some
times are
dark.
so amazing in terms of the gifts they give you,
Mm,
right? It's that gift that shows up that doesn't look anything like a gift. But
yeah,
in the end, it gives you something that you couldn't have ever gotten otherwise,
yeah.
right?
One of
Those
my
are
favorite things is like, look. Uh, there's a wall. Okay. I remember having the chair, like just one living room chair in the corner of my bedroom for years.
mm,
The Christmas right before we left, I got one of those foldable wobbly tables that I could slip under that chair and pull out when I was working. That was my office. Now I have a whole room for my office.
decorated, no less, right?
Decorated, no less. Like, I have a table. To me, that this is, I did not think that I would be here. Mostly because when mental health comes at the same time as, I'm going to say, forced entrepreneurship, it's not usually a good combination. Usually there's a lot of tripping and falling, and then you get up and
Mhm.
you try again and you trip and you fall. And so there's usually some years potentially in there where you're doing nothing, essentially.
So I just have to point out that you're talking about struggling and hard things, and you're smiling and laughing and energized around how miserable it could have been.
Yeah. Well,
So it
hindsight
sounds
makes you
like
feel a lot better.
you're on the other side of it now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's a wildly, probably difficult analogy to use sometimes, but I don't find one more appropriate. If you find one, please tell me. I'll stop using this bad one. But yeah, I liken those toughest crucible moments that we go through to kind of the birth canal, right? I mean, it was a bit of a bloody mess. No one wanted to do it. It was hurtful. Everybody was screaming. It was chaos. But we're glad to be alive. We're on the other side of some of these really difficult things. And it sounds like each of these pieces were really critical foundational puzzle pieces to get you to the mindset of where you are today so easily, interviewing others and capturing your gifts on live stage. So what's next?
Ooh, okay. I'm actually really excited for what's next. Mostly because once I had that conversation with Shelly and I realized that healing is just trying to keep a public bathroom clean and it's near impossible, that released energy that was reserved for that task of constantly cleaning, 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 healing, healing, healing. I have so much more energy now that I get things done around the house, which is cool. Lots of projects there. But the projects that I'm focused on right now is I'm known for my questions. I'm a very deep thinker, mostly because I had to be for so long. And I hid it away for so long that I have to unpack it in order to see it. So I ask deep questions. I did a show called, or still do a show called Monday Morning Mindfulness on my Facebook page every week. I'm at almost 500 episodes. So I've been doing this for years. I'm shifting that into a paid email subscription that is literally asking you for 30 seconds of passive attention a week. That will have one awareness question, one sentence of context for those who need it like me. I need to know where that quote came from. Like, was it me? Was it you? Was it somebody else I talked to? I want to give credit. And then a link to a blog post with just a little bit more context. And then an image with that one quote on it that you can put on your laptop, your desktop, your phone, your tablet, so that passively, and this is the difference with marketing, there's active attention, which is what most marketing is. It's very overwhelming. But since I talk about mental health, I know we're all overwhelmed right now. So how do I bring it to passive attention? Just read the email, put the picture on your phone. You never have to think about it again all week. But guess what your brain does? It thinks about it behind the scenes all week.
All week, right.
And because I ask powerful self-awareness questions, what I'm really doing is I'm helping you shift the 4 reasons that we fail into the 4 ways that we succeed. Yeah.
The 4 ways that we fail. More.
So there's, of course, random things that we cannot control. But the 4 things that we can control that cause us to fail are the way that we think, the way that we feel, how we act, and what we believe.
Okay.
Which many people know, right? But sometimes we just need to reframe to understand it a little better. So what happens in these shifts, not the healing, but the transformation side, is we're shifting one thought to a better thought, a more empowering thought that goes toward the habits that we want and not away from the habits that we don't want.
Yeah.
Fear has no direction. So if we just run away from fear all the time, we can run in circles, just how most of us feel. Or what I do with Courageous Connection is I say, yes, I understand that you have a history of rejection. Here are the stories that prove it. But what is the equal and opposite of that feeling? For me, it's connection, it's acceptance. And so everything that I do is running toward connection and acceptance, not just for me, but the people that I surround myself with and my audience. So how do I create things to help them feel connected and accepted? So what are the thoughts that I used to feel? What are that I used to have? What are the feelings that I used to have? So I thought that I wasn't loved. I thought that nobody liked me. I thought I would die alone, right? Here's the beliefs, the thoughts, the feelings. I thought I was rejected all the time. I felt rejected. It's the shifting of those things. So now when I think about the connection and acceptance, I think of everybody as a friend. I may not have ever met you before, but you're my friend. Are you a close friend yet? No. But I treat everybody as they're my friend. Then I adjust the relationship afterwards, according to where it is. And so I can have that openness, that curiosity, coming away from the blame, the shame, the judgment, right? Or I open myself up to be accepting of others that reflect that old version of me, because that's who I'm serving.
Yeah.
So Laura, who lost all of her friends in grade 9, Laura, who almost died 7 times, How do I get to know her, like her, and trust her in all of her moments of struggle without asking anything else of her? And I do that by getting to know the thoughts, the feelings, the actions, the beliefs of that version of me in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you're surviving 5 or surviving ninth grade or surviving whichever part of it is, it's
Yeah.
part of the course of life
Mhm.
that we go through these trials that just seem to sear our souls in some ways. And then we have to go back and look at that imprint and see how much of that is a badge of honor and how much of that is just something we won't let heal. We keep picking at, right? We keep, it's like a scab, right? We just kind of keep picking it off and it keeps coming up. Eventually it heals, but it takes longer than it needs to and probably has a bigger scar because of the the level of search in it. But what I hear you saying is, unlike the analogy of maybe going back through a vacuum cleaner bag, we've already vacuumed, just like, no, we really don't need to know. Just let's get
Okay.
rid of it, right? There's that part of examining the past that we really don't want to do. Because what are the pearls? What are the lessons learned, right? That we kind of take with us as we go forward. And we can love all over the part of us that survived whatever we survived.
Mhm.
And as you said, not expect anything except, you know, just be willing to be loved and I love you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But how we take all of that into the culmination or assimilation of who we are now, knowing all of that, what does that look like? If you and I were to get together 1 year from now, and you were to tell me all about the amazing success you had this year, what would you be talking
Personally, I would be talking about the personal growth.
about? Okay.
Because, yes, it's wonderful to have the audience. It's wonderful to have a successful business. Working on that. I certainly don't claim to have those at the moment because you've watched my last couple years. Like, I'm trying to get back into it. This in the last few months has been my first step back into it. So
Good for you.
next year, you're going to see me go, you know what? I realized that in order to be successful in business, I needed to take control of my health, not just
Mhm.
emotionally, but physically as well.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have my health, how can I hold the space for not just myself, but also you, to be that
Yeah.
support for you, to put myself out there the way that I want to put myself out there? If I'm not looking after me, I will not be able to walk again for a month. So April of last year, I couldn't walk for a month because I pushed myself and overcompensated too much. Never again. That was my never again moment. We're not going there.
Yeah.
Next year, I'm
So
like, I'm
what
going to
was
be
the
so
benefit? If you don't mind me pausing right there, what was the benefit? This is going to sound like a crazy question.
no.
Ride this train with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the benefit you received from not being able to walk for a year? There was something good there. What was that? What did you get to avoid by not walking? Or what was that? What was the thing you took away?
It
You're
was my
laughing.
body.
What's in there?
I'm definitely laughing. It was my body's way of saying, slow down. You're not listening. Okay, we already tried all the things. Now we're going to make you not work so that you physically cannot do all of those things and push yourself.
Slow down.
You
Tactical
have
pause.
to slow down. Because I would.
Mm.
I would push, I would people please, because I thought that that was more important, and I would risk myself to make other people happy.
Yeah.
I would risk my health to make other people happy and meet their expectations. No, no, not happening.
Okay,
So my body was
so
like,
there's a
I already
tension going on in the back of my mind. I'm wanting to dive into questions there, but
I know.
uh,
At this point, it's kind of like, where do
yes,
we find me? That kind of stuff. We have
yeah.
about 4
Well,
minutes.
and I would be a really bad coach if I didn't do one follow-up that had you think in a certain direction for yourself. When you are people pleasing. And you said that, right? When you're being helpful to others, it's an amazing gift to have, to be overly helpful to others. And when we look at balancing power in interpersonal relationships on the leadership scales, one of the things we know is that to have a balance of power in relationships, we have to be both useful and helpful to others and them meeting their goals.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And we need to be willing to assert our own needs on the other scale. And if we're overly helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but not really so comfortable, accustomed to fill in the blank,
Yep.
asserting our needs,
Mm-hmm.
because we were raised maybe with the mindset of, oh, it's good enough for everybody else, it's good enough for me. No, it's not. Who's included? Who's not included in everyone else? Me. So it's
Yeah.
good for everyone except me, is really the truth in that one.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that, right? Oh, yeah, it's good enough for. No, if it's good enough for all of us, then it works for all of us, right? If everyone can find their needs must be met, wants can be negotiated, but needs must be met. And if I'm not vocalizing my needs or comfortable vocalizing my needs, but I'm always helpful to others, I'm almost certainly in a state of self sacrifice most of the time.
Yep.
And when that self sacrifice tank just uses the last bit of gas, I'm done. And if someone doesn't do something for me that I want them to do, I'm hurt. Why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't know you wanted that done. Well, I always know what you need. I always give you what you need. Could you not have figured that out for me? Right? Why can I know what you need just without you telling me, but you can never know what I need without me saying?
Mm.
The moral of the story is the blind spot here is in me not asserting my needs actually is, and I'm drawing a line in my head. I'm not coaching. This isn't coaching. This is consulting. It's like, well, this isn't a coaching session. So I'm having an internal debate right now.
Yeah.
But truly, not being willing to assert our own needs is training others to disregard us. Take that in.
Yep. So I'll explain it in two very short ways. Is one, Heidi here with Blue Talks described it as, Laura, you have confidence, but you don't seem to feel worthy. Ha. Yeah.
Yes.
Spent a whole year and a half on that, feeling a lot better. The second part of that is I people please to feel safe. So add the need for safety on top of the not feeling like I'm worthy. You can see how that rolls downhill. Gets really muddy. So I will say that at this point, you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, mostly under Laura Lake SD, which used to stand for Sustainable Design because I used to own that business. But now I've worked into my own stuff. Preferably on Linktree, which is Laura Lake SD. But if you want to message me, the best way to get a hold of me is through Facebook Messenger. I do not like emails. I probably will not check your email almost ever, unless it's like a transactional thing. And I want to leave you with this. The hardest decision that I ever made was to choose me. That was the hardest decision. But what I learned from that was the hardest habit was courage, the courage to do so.
What has it meant to you to have courage in all that you do?
Oh, we don't have time for that, but I can answer it afterwards. I want to say thank you. I will call this the official close of my interview, but we will stick around and we'll chat just for a couple more minutes until our next guest comes. So thank you, Lisa, for interviewing me. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you being really open and honest and vulnerable about really important things. And so thank you so much for being transparent about that.
Awesome. Okay, close. Good. Okay, now we have a few minutes. I was like, I need to get it done in under the 42 minutes or we're cut off. So now we just get to play. This is like the social media-ish portion.
Let's play. What do you want to talk about?
What is something that stood out to you during this interview?
That there are 1,000 directions to go in, and they're all good. We could pull on any of those threads and have, dozens of skeins of yarn around us. So I'm just quite sure that I'd love to know a lot more about you and how you're doing and what you're doing. And I admire that you've really just embraced it and jumped in. So many people today are trying to figure out how to get a platform together and try to figure out how to get their voice out there. I come to podcasting and interviewing and so on, not because it ever occurred to me to want to, but because I'm trying to publish a book. So naturally, they said I should be on podcasts. And my mind is trying to connect all these dots. Why do I have to go talk if I'm trying to write something, But I guess it's all connected because if you don't do one, then it doesn't sort of justify the other. But
Mm.
what would you tell people who are trying to sort of break through the barriers of their first podcast?
Their first podcast, their first talk, their first book, whatever that happens to be, I want you to think about the version of you who was in the
Mm.
middle of the struggle that you're talking about. So for me, the first thing I did was I wrote in the very first Blue Talks Business Life in the Universe book. Oh my
Nice.
God, there I am.
Yay.
I was telling people about my bicycle accident.
Okay.
That message was so important to me because I wanted this chapter to be something that would help that old version.
Okay.
So think about that old version of you and write something, speak something, do podcasting that is serving that version. And then I want you to think on the other side. What if you never published it? What if you never put it out on social media? How would that version of you feel? You had the answers. You had the help. It was right there. And you're like, it's not perfect enough. I'm going to not post it. That hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to do
Yeah.
that to yourself? What would that version of you need to hear? They don't care if it's perfect. They need something, anything. They're so desperate for help. Help them the way that you currently know how to help them. Plain and simple. That'll get you over it almost every single time.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that's the new way of communicating, as it were, right? Any of the just type and go is gone. Many people, instead of TV, will listen to podcasts now or radio, certainly.
Yep.
There's a lot more interesting voices being heard out there.
Yeah. So really quickly, the thing that stood out to me was that you went into the architecture side. I don't know if I've ever really talked about the architecture side. So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Now we do have our next background.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
I was just about to call you Lisa. Lauren. Lauren, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to join us. Can you hear us, Lauren? She might not. I'll write it in here. Are you ready? Says SpongeBob. Yes, maybe. I don't know if Lauren can hear us. Can you hear us? I love tech. Oh, we're getting some typing. I love how this is live.
Mhm.
Welcome to all of the tech issues that happen live and needing to deal with them in the moment. It's perfectly fine. Mostly I just make fun of it and highlight it because I want people to know you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, no, that's impossible.
I'm going to bring you up to stage anyway because you look fine. Can you hear us, Lauren?
Hang on a second.
Yep.
Hello.
How about now?
Looks like your mic is muted.
You're muted now.
There you go.
Well, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, you sound like you are really far away from a mic, so it goes.
better?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, ready?
Okay. I was like, do I have to adjust your
Deep
mic?
breath.
Okay, we're gonna do this.
Let it go.
So
Let all the tension of
we're
getting
not going to do
online
that
go.
as an Ehlers-Danlos patient. No. So no,
Oh,
I'm fine.
you have Ehlers-Danlos too?
Yep.
Oh, is it the hypermobile one?
No, I've had two hip. So I've had a hip replacement, two knees. And that's sort of part of my story of how I got here.
Ooh, okay,
And
we'll get into that
yeah,
then.
yeah.
Hello,
So,
fellow zebra.
yeah. Anyway,
Actually, one of our
All new
previous
joy.
parts.
one of our
All
previous
new
shows,
parts.
we had 3 zebras on at the same time. So me, my co-host, and our guest, we were all zebras. And for those who don't know, zebra is the term for somebody with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yeah, and they talk about how rare it is, but
I know.
I can't help but trip over people. So yeah,
What is
Okay.
it called?
Ehlers-Danlos.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
it's a problem with our connective tissue and collagen production. And so, yeah, so oftentimes, like, we all have a lot of joint laxity. You know, we're incredibly flexible to our detriment, to our you know, like,
Pop out the
um,
shoulders. Yeah.
yeah. But it's more like in wound care, cardiac, breathing. But there's a lot of comorbidities that come along with it. And I find it's the comorbidities that are almost worse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. So how we usually start an interview is not knowing anything about you because I want to
sorry.
ask you. No, that's fine. It's fine. It's fun. Very fun. Because I ask a question at the beginning that kind of sneakily gets you to tell us about you without you telling us about you. And then we see how it weaves in because to me it's really fun. You may find some interest in it too. So here's my question. Lauren, if you could have other people describe you in 3 words, what would you love those 3 words to be?
So not whether they are true or not.
Exactly.
So yeah. So I guess I want people to. I guess I wish that, or I want people to perceive me as, being kind,
Mm-hmm.
helpful, and just a good person.
Aww.
It's really all I'm striving for.
Make it so.
Exactly.
Okay, and the only other question that I have like pre-programmed in my brain is how do these 3 words, kind, helpful, and a good person, how do they play a key role in the core message that you have for people?
Well, it's really at the heart of the whole message.
Yeah.
So I'm currently doing my doctoral work. A lot of my work currently focuses exclusively within the Canadian wealth management space. And I help financial advisors deal with the emotional intersection that they run up against with their clients. And there is a very important rule that financial advisors have to uphold, and that's the know your client. And that's really where this story starts. Is I had a very successful 25-year plus career within financial services. I was a groundbreaking maverick of creating learning around compliance, risk management, and how we treat our clients and work ethically. And so this provided me incredible opportunity to travel across Canada and actually across the world, helping financial advisors do good business. So in 2019, I have this. It was it was the pivoting point. 2019, I lost the job. My body was broken. My spirit was broken. I had cognitive impairments. And I was like, I was done. I was a burned out heap of nothing. But I'm also not independently wealthy. So it's not like I could just leave the workforce and go, well, thank you, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
uh, so I had to figure out what I was going to do. But with a broken body, I mean, at the time I was in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
and I am still physically disabled because of, I've had 2 knee replacements, 4 or 5 ankle surgeries, a hip replacement, and all of this stuff takes time. And so I had to really look at my life in 2019 and say, what is this all about? And what is it I want to do? And how am I live with myself?
Mm.
And what are the choices that you need to make? And I wrote about this actually in my John Gray chapter. When you're standing at the edge and you're standing on the precipice and you have to make a choice, you really need to sort of think about your time, access, and money. Once you establish those 3 things, you can make better, healthier decisions to get yourself off the ledge or help propel you across the crevasse. It depends on how you look at it. So I chose not to go back to corporate life because clearly it was not for me. And I went back to school and I became a registered psychotherapist. I got my master's in counseling and and then I was like, okay, so I'm going to be a psychotherapist. And within this practice, you go through an 8-month skill building practicum where you work with actual clients. And at that point in my education, I was like, I don't think I want to work with people on like everyday life stuff, right? Like if you come to me because you're upset with your partner and I ask you, have you tried talking to them and you tell me no, that's going to be hard for me. And I have to recognize my professional limitations. So I knew I wasn't that everyday marriage counselor relationship person. So I managed to land um, a space within a transition house for men called Alpha House. And it's for men who are transitioning back into the community from substance abuse. So they come from a recovery treatment facility into Alpha House where they start rebuilding their life, whether that's work skills, life skills, working on their recovery. And so I worked there during the height of COVID. Now I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And during COVID, some of you may remember hearing that we were actually locked in our houses for over a year and a half. So here I am. I've had 25 years of working in high finance, working with the ultra rich, and now I'm in the middle of a pandemic living in a house full of 18 men, a bunch of them who had been paroled out, who are all dealing with their own stuff. A lot of them were unhoused. And here I find myself. But it was within this space that all of the sanity thief, which is my imposter syndrome work, comes in. My financial services work starts to take place because I start having different conversations with people who I would have never run across in my life. And it was at that dining room table in Alpha House that all of this stuff starts. And I realized that imposter syndrome is real, but it's not. And I realize that how we know people is not sufficient. So I take my therapist skills and I create a whole new way for financial advisors to know their clients based on my therapeutic knowledge and skills. Because as a registered psychotherapist, when I start a relationship with a new client, I create something called the therapeutic alliance. And what research tells us is the quality of this therapeutic alliance really determines the efficacy and outcome of the therapy. So the better the therapeutic alliance, the better the outcomes are probably going to be for our clients. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. Sounds an awful lot like a financial advisor.
Or
Trying to
coach.
get, right? So And it's all based on this biopsychosocial theory. So I create a whole new way to know your clients and know your clients differently. And it is from a place of empathy. It's an empathetic position, which is a different switch. And, and I have created a whole new way that we interact with others. So I am now right back in wealth management. So it was a bit of a circuitous route, but it's been a really good lesson. And actually, I'm just finishing up my doctorate in this. So
Congratulations.
yeah, so I'm doing and again, things like you would never do. I went into my doctorate going, so I'm going to revolutionize Canadian wealth management and how we teach financial advisors. And that's still very true, but what I didn't anticipate coming out of it was this incredible strong feminist voice and position that I really had never let fly before because of where I worked. I work with men,
Mm,
and that feminist position is oftentimes in direct opposition to their own thoughts, beliefs, and values. But the reality is, Canadian wealth management's in trouble, and we don't have enough women in wealth management. And in fact, over the past 20 years, 3%, that's the growth. We've seen an increase of 3% in Canadian women financial advisors.
what do you
We
think prevents
Go ahead.
women from joining? What do you think prevents
Oh,
women from getting involved?
such a good
Outside the
question.
obvious, we're two women, so we probably have some good guesses. But for our audience who may not know,
Um, yeah, so it's a systemic thing. We really need to look back at sort of the history of wealth management. This was a concept born in the 1700s in the UK to help the wealthy get more wealthy without actually having to do work. It's this whole passive income thing, right? This is where compound interest and all of this stuff and investing and insurance and all of these things, like how do we make money out of money? And so when this comes to Canada, right? So we're built on these colonial structures, these very ancient institutions, and it was still very much this helping the rich get richer their way. And so it was always this very niche group. And it's not until like like the end of the 90s when we have this huge .com thing happening and everybody and all of a sudden middle class just pops off and everybody gets richer because of the technological advances, especially in Canada because we are an incubator of a lot of this stuff. So all of a sudden, everybody had all this disposable income. So what do you do with it? And actually, the whole concept of retirement really starts to become a big thing because now people can retire because we have pensions or have pensions, depending on where you go, right? We had government support networks and safety systems that would allow us to not work forever and ever. But then the market corrected. The bubble burst, COVID happened, the savings and loans crisis happened, right? The big short, which is all about, mortgage-backed securities. And so all of this stuff is a real turnoff to a lot of women because it's very male driven and male dominated. You look at the landscape today, we know that 51% of financial advisors in Canada are white men over the age of 50. Why don't women want to get in to wealth management or why do they have trouble staying in? Because it's difficult. Because men's identity is often with their career and their career alone. That comes first and foremost, and that's their training, right? We've sold men this false bill of goods that, boys don't cry, you need to be the hunter-gatherer provider, and that's you go out to war and you defend. But women were trained very differently. So men are problem solvers, they just fix stuff. Women nurture. Women are supportive, women are collaborative, because we have to share things, unlike men. We share our bodies with our children, right? We share our homes because we're always the ones looking after the children or the elders, right? So, especially in today's day and age, we have this sandwich generation. So, women can't be just financial advisors because they're wives, they're homemakers, they're mothers, they're daughters, they're caregivers. And this is how the system was perpetuated, you know. We kept telling women you can have and do it all. Yeah, now the attitude is very different. But the problem is wealth management hasn't caught up to that. It's an antiquated system. There was no impetus to move and to change because men controlled the money. And this has been happening throughout the whole Victorian times up until now. And if you think that's changed, you know, that would be an incorrect assumption. So, you know, it's hard to be out there doing the hustle culture and bringing in business when your kid's school is on the phone calling you, or you know, you have to leave early to make sure that you take the dog to the vet and you know, buy the groceries. Like, it's a lot. And working
What
in
are
wealth
two things that women, let's say, because and we know that there are some gross generalizations
yeah.
involved in this, but overall, we can
hmm
say that there are certainly trends,
hmm
right, that can verify everything. What would you say are two or three small things that women can do, maybe, in terms of a benefit, right? There's a lot that they can't do because they're being spread a little bit too thin, I hear you saying. But what's one or two things they can do or insights they do bring that may be a benefit?
So that's a really hard question because, and I say this with respect, because we need to stop minimalizing the problem, right?
Mhm.
And we minimize it by saying, like, "Oh, I know we can't affect change, but what's the one?" And I'm sorry, Lisa, but like, what's the one small thing you can do? And I'm like, no, man.
Change is something totally different than opening up your mind to thinking about something. Just to
So
be clear, I know exactly what you mean
yeah,
there, and I would
and
agree with you
yeah,
100%.
so
That's
um,
a different subject.
I'm very conflicted because we are in these, and I keep saying we are in extraordinary times, and I think I'm just going to keep saying that until the day I die. Women aren't safe. Women aren't safe today.
Hmm.
And we don't have the luxury of walking out of our houses, most of us, and engaging in the community at large, like taking public transportation, seeking medical help, right? Like, there are so many places that women are injured and women are threatened. And and when I say threatened, I don't mean just physically, but the narratives and the messaging and how we are treated is tough. So, what's the one small thing that I would say to women? Use your
Hmm.
voice, set your boundaries, and it's going to be
Hmm.
ugly and it's going to be awful because nobody likes that. I tell this to my clients all the time, right? You know you're doing something right when people are upset with you when you start saying no and setting your boundaries. But the problem
Hmm.
is we have this system that, you know, we name and shame, right? We talk about these broad brushes,
Yeah.
right? And so now women are being labeled as difficult. Well, not now. We've always been labeled as difficult, but you know what I mean? Like, so you have to walk in your truth. And that's a really, really hard thing to do. And that means standing up for yourself and saying, I'm not going to be treated like this. Like, firing financial advisors, right? Because they're not doing right by you, because they don't treat you like you want to be. Or, you know, telling a doctor to cease and desist and step back because you're leaving because you don't appreciate how you're being treated. To sitting at the table with your leadership team, having them push work down on you, saying, well, you know, it won't take long. No, no. Don't tell me how long things are going to take. And this is one of the challenges in this society that we live in, because I feel like the dog is being wagged by the tail. And for me, the tail is money and consumerism, right? And that's really driving people's decision, is money. Because we can't afford to live. We need to eat. We need to live. We need to have fun. How are we going to deal with our stress? And all of that stuff gets wrapped up into this whole big money machine. And so, well, what's the one small thing that women can do? Start speaking up.
So
That's
what was
Start.
it?
Use your voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and it's frustrating, you know, especially, with technology, because it's really easy to ignore, disregard, dismiss. These are a lot of things that happen to women, right? Our voices aren't heard and aren't respected. And so we need to keep putting that forward. And I've chosen Canadian Wealth Management in which to do this.
So what was it that got you interested in finances to begin with?
I fell into it by accident. I'm of that age where, when I was graduating from college, so I initially went to a community college because I didn't know what I wanted to do with life. And so when I graduated, it was during that time in the early 90s where there was that big first correction where they just whacked out all of middle management, right? And there was mass layoffs and all of this stuff. So trying to find an entry level position was really, really tough. And in a city like Toronto, I'm competing against people that have already been working. And so I just wasn't finding work. So I took a job in mainland China. And so I moved overseas for a couple of years to be a teacher and sort of like figure stuff out. I grew up on a small farm. My life was pretty small. I grew up in a
Which
small
part of
town.
China?
I spent most of my time in a city called Guangzhou in Guangdong province.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I spent a bit of time up in Beijing afterwards. And it was there that, started to figure out and started to see some stuff. But when I came back to Toronto, I needed to eat. And a friend of mine said, I can give you a contract cleaning out somebody's office at Manulife Financial. And this was before Manulife was demutualized, so it was still a privately held company. And that's where it all started. And I started interacting with financial advisors and salespeople, and the rest, they say, is history.
Now, in my house, I'm not allowed to invite any more financial advisors over to the house because, and this speaks to your point of what you're saying this whole time, very few of them would actually sit down and listen to what we were actually trying to tell them. They thought that they understood. And so they would come in with their pre-programmed, well, just like don't eat out and don't do this. And we're like, I don't think you understand.
Well, the biggest crime is the men telling women to lose weight.
Yes.
Like I hear this all the time, especially with insurance salesmen. Well, if you just lost 20 pounds, your rating scale, And I'm like, you first of all, And so this is my doctoral work really addresses how we, not only how we talk to our clients, but it's also around building self-awareness, right? For you to know another requires you to know something about yourself. And especially in financial services, because we have this whole notion, this whole concept of behavioral finance, that people's biases are going to be their financial ruin, and advisors need to learn clients' biases to work with them. Well, that only works if you know what your own are and you have extensive mental health practice, like me. Most financial advisors don't have that training. Listen, it's a 200 multiple choice question to get securities licensed in this country. That's it. Listen, a criminal record doesn't even stop you. You can get pardoned and still get a securities license. But our government deems them essential services. So we need to do better.
Wow.
We need to do better and it's all around, because at the end of the day, when we keep ignoring advisors' behavior of walking into your house going, hey, Laura and gang, here's your life and what it's going to look like. And you're like, cool, dude, this has nothing to do with my life. And so there is an actual physical consequence to you and to all investors, because advisors, and they've done research on this, they've done research on advisor trading patterns, and financial advisors assume that all of their clients are just like them. And it shows up in their trading patterns. Luckily, their clients' accounts do better than theirs, but that's a pretty sad statement.
Wow.
We need to change conversations. We need to change how we talk to people. We need to change how we perceive roles. We need to take a hard look about how money functions in our world. I have a very good friend of mine who also is working in a really important space of environmental social governance around ESG and how we treat the environment and people, and her big thought study right now is, what if we didn't have money?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Coming soon
believe,
to a theater near you.
yeah.
Electronic currency. Right.
Well, and this is what I'm saying. I believe money is sentient. Money will always make more money for itself because of how the power structure is tied into it, right? The dependence that we have on it, not only from a basic needs, like that's the food and housing and all of that good stuff, but we need fun and love and companionship. We need to learn. We need help. We need help with our health. All of these things cost money, and we've kind of lost the plot. And especially with social media and AI, which is now adding a whole other layer of complexity. Because now your AI advisor is going to listen to you and say, why, yes, Laura, here's all the things that I said. And they're going to list everything you said back to them. And you're going to go, you understand me. And they're going to go, based on these variables, we're going to pick all of these things. And here's why. And you're like, oh, this is so easy. And I didn't have to listen to the misogynistic jokes. I didn't have to listen to, or I didn't have to say, I don't think you really understand. Because it's not going to judge you. And this is what I keep saying to advisors. I'm like, you need to start changing how we engage with people. Because people, like clients will leave you. AI, 24/7. You can show up in your pajamas. It doesn't care. And it will probably give you equally as good financial service and recommendations right now.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The similar thing is happening in many industries, many industries. And we're figuring out where it matters, where that human dimension really has meaning in terms of the service offerings, to your point. Real estate is another one. They're using AI, and it's amazing. You have people falling in love with their AI person. Oh, you're so thoughtful. Well, here's this new house. You said you have a cat. Well, there's a vet down the block, and there's this cat park, and blah blah. I just
there's
thought of
the
this
cat
house and
cafe, and
perfect for you, right? And then this person comes back and says, you know what, I want to see that house. Well, I'm going to set you up with this agent. No, can't you bring me? And it's like, I'm an AI agent, you know? But even when they say AI agent, people aren't connecting the dots. That's not a sentient being in the human form. That is an artificial intelligence that's tracking and has a broad range of search capacity to meet your specific needs.
And
But they have this relationship that gets established.
But the sad thing is, there's a great author, Harari. He wrote a book called Nexus, and I don't know if you've read it, but he talks about you know, what is happening with social media, machine learning, and this AI. And the difference is consciousness. AI has intelligence, it doesn't have consciousness. Well, and this is where it gets kind of tricky, because consciousness is that very human experience, right? It's all of that emotional response in that liminal, ambiguous space of context. But the problem is, we don't want that as a financial advisor. We want that clear, calm, focused professional that can really set aside their personal judgment. And that's not happening. Financial advisors are under tremendous stress. It's a tough job. And when you're not trained to deal with the humanity of people, right? Like dealing with the tears, the anger, the denial, loss, gain, like it's so complex. And so there is appeal of AI where you can just, like, pardon the expression, barf your thoughts out into an AI bot, and it's very calmly going to say, I've got you. Don't panic, right? As opposed to somebody who doesn't want to engage with you and doesn't want to talk about your divorce.
Doesn't know how, right?
Well, and this is it. And so what I'm finding in my research is, well, for sure, I know that they don't know how, because we don't teach them that. But they also feel that it's not their place. And they have no business being in their clients' personal lives. And I'm saying, you don't have that luxury anymore, because money is personal. And again, this is more of my research bears out that by 2030, financial advice is going to look very different. Financial advisors are going to be expected to help their clients with day-to-day financial management.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to my financial advisor in a year and a half. And I do this work.
I talk to mine every 3 months at a minimum.
So you have a really good advisor. So that's great.
I do for the last 12 years.
Yep.
But I would suggest to you something you said really it brought back in a flash. The financial advisor that we chose to do our 401k, I was part owner of an engineering company.
Oh, you're
and
American.
She came in once or twice. I couldn't figure out what that face she had was telling me, but she looked alarmed, distressed. There were all kinds of emotions going on. She said none of it. She did whatever she did, said whatever she said. And from that point on, she called me and said, I'm so sorry, but we can't meet in your office. If you don't mind, could you come to my office? And I said, well, yeah, but it's a little bit across town. She's like, yeah, I've clocked it. It's 15 minutes. Come on over. We'll have lunch afterwards. And I'm thinking, now there's lunch, and I'm like, work, 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 work. Crazy job. CFO, CEO, so a lot of intentional crazy. We go to her office and she said, would you like a cup of tea? Here's the tea box. Pick one. And I'm like, do you have a report to show me, a decision to make, something to sign? Anything can go, go, go. And she's like, okay, would you like cream or lemon? I'm like, there is no time for this. She would ask me all kinds of, what's keeping you up at night now? What's happening with this? And I'm like gripping the chair rails thinking, I have to get back to the office. I'm under so much pressure. There's so much going on. And she said, one thing I noticed is that you have 2 physical offices in the company. Isn't that interesting? Not only 2 titles, but 2 physical rooms to work in. That's a lot for one person, don't you think? And I'm like, aren't we here to talk finance? She literally is the epitome of she's the unicorn, apparently. I didn't know until you were saying what you're saying that there weren't a whole tribe of these women out there, but we got lucky. She understood that I couldn't think about anything except the critical deadlines that I had when I was in that building. And she was right. People were constantly calling, walking in, a million things going on. She literally took me out of the environment and she said, oh, if you don't mind, I just have this little thing. I put everybody's cell phones right there in that little basket when they come in. It just helps us stay engaged. And I took so much away from that session with her, and we kept her the entire time. She was with Morgan Stanley, and she said most of her career, she was the only woman at the boardroom table or in the building doing financial work, to your point. but she did it in a way that told me it had nothing to do with money. It
And
had everything
that's
to
it.
do with how we feel about money, the meaning we put onto money, right? All these other pieces and parts. But I'm understanding from you that that is not a typical experience, that she really was amazing. I always
Yeah.
knew she was amazing. She's become a dear friend and mentor of mine still to this day. God bless her. Um,
Well, tell her I say thanks and
I
keep up the
will.
good work. And
She
that
did.
I'm out there rooting and helping people with this, right?
Nice.
Because
Yeah.
we are now dependent on financial advice, whether it's
Mhm.
from our retail bank branches, Lord love us, or from independent finance. Well, no, because we don't teach any of this to any of these people
Mhm.
because it is assumed that you're just a people person, so you will know how to do this.
Ah,
They don't recognize that it's an actual deliberate practiced skill. Like I literally one whole course was just on how to do this as a therapist. And so this is really what my educational offerings to financial advisors is. I teach them how to be a therapist in like 3 days. And
mm,
it's just teaching that key skill and how to ask questions, and it's like how to ask it and then shut up and
good. At
lean back.
Sorry to interrupt. At this point, I just want to make
Thank you,
sure that
Mitch.
we know where to find you, and of course, your
Right.
favorite way to communicate.
Um, Always just hit me up on my website, www.point-shift.ca. I am also on LinkedIn. Point Shift is on LinkedIn, and Lauren Jeffery is also on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest and quickest ways to reach me. So if you need help or you just want to chat, drop me a line. I'm here to help.
Awesome. And then I do like to hold space at the end. We have about a minute or so left, just in case there's something on your mind or in your heart that you want to share. So, what would you love to leave people with today?
I find myself saying a lot, and there's obviously a lot of sighing.
Yeah.
Being a therapist in today's day and age, I'm acutely aware of just how much life is for everyone. And I can say with utmost certainty, everybody just needs to take a big breath and a pause and just remember that everything will work out for its best and highest good. And if we work and a little more gently and we walk a little more gently upon this earth, I think we will see great change.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Well, thank you, ladies. This has been a treat.
I was
Lovely
thinking,
to meet you.
yeah, there's so many things I want to ask you, but I will call this the official close of the main interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I
Now,
appreciate it.
yeah, I do invite you to stay for the next 5 minutes as we like to. Oh, hold on. There we go. As we like to just do a little bit of reflection. This part's more of the social media where we tease a little bit of our favorite parts of what we just talked about. So I'm going to start with you, Lauren. What is something that stood out to you in our conversation today?
Oh, yeah, I don't even have to think about this. Really, the importance and the highlighting of the feminist position that is generally lacking in wealth management. We talk about the importance, but to really affect any meaningful change, we really need to look at the origin story and those narratives and how they're perpetuating. I just didn't think I would be talking about that today. But I'm glad we did because it's clearly important.
Very much so. One of the things that stood out to me was, oh God, when, which one do I want to share? You said, how do we make money out of money? And then you started listing some of the ways that we, I guess, recently decided to do things with money so that money could make money, like compound interest, investing, and insurance. For
But these
some
have
reason,
been
I
around
thought
for
they were
years.
around forever.
Well, no, they have been around for hundreds of years. but people haven't made the connection between what that actually means. So if I can do a plug on somebody else's book, there's an Irish economist named David McWilliams, and he wrote a wonderful book, and actually it features a lot in a lot of my stuff. It's called Money, A Story of Humanity. And it talks about how money shaped our culture. And if we ignore that huge critical piece, then we're not going to be able to affect change. And this shows up in anyways, we've talked all about this, but do check it out. Money, David McWilliams.
Wow, cool. Okay, Lisa, what is something that stood out to you during our conversation today? I put you on mute just because there was some feedback.
Unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you had to unmute me since you had muted me. Sorry. I guess my biggest takeaways are how interesting it is that there's not a straight line on anything. It's always a circle, an evolution, a spiral. And where I am hearing what you're saying and being in Canada, I've traveled the world, grew up on East Coast. I'm now in Florida, but have lived all over, including in Asia. So I recognize some of the places you talked about. I wonder if there aren't just degrees of that shift happening and they're so subtle that it's just hard to track until you look back comprehensively. What would if we pulled on that thread in time going forward, how much change do we think we could impact going forward in a 1-year horizon, 3-year horizon, 5-year horizon?
I think the answer depends on who you ask. And and if it's me, I'm like, I expect to affect all this change in like 5 years. I'm gonna take the world by storm. Yeah, no. It's gonna be a long, slow process. But it stands up with us using our voice for change.
Which I think we did a lot of today. And I'm so glad that you did go there with us, Lauren, because I did want to know about the ways that you share your message. But we didn't get to it because I'm like, I didn't know all this history stuff.
And this is it. When we don't know where things come from, we don't know how to effectively deal with them.
Yeah.
And this starts with simple things. Here's another simple thing that you can do. We need to understand what our social identity is. Who are we? Because the place in which we stand is the place from which we speak. And if we don't understand what our lives mean to us in terms of our identity and our cultural identities and our professional identities, we can't affect change.
Aw. Well, thank you again, Lauren,
you.
for being here with me and with Lisa.
It was nice
so
meeting you.
good. And I've been admiring the bright spring color of your lipstick.
Thank you.
Yes, bright lipstick.
My power lipstick.
Thanks.
All right, ladies. Have a good day. We'll chat later. Bye-bye.
And our next guest is behind the scenes. Will, just give me a thumbs up if you're ready to join us. Thank you. Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Hi, Will.
Good. I'm really warm. This heat wave needs to stop. The AC
I
is
hear
not
you.
in the room.
Yeah, I hear you. We traveled to Italy thinking we would get away from it. It was just as hot there.
Is it? Okay. I'm going to change my pen color so I can make sure all the notes are together. Will, I like to start every interview off with the same question. I've asked you this before. Your answers may be the same or they may be different. Who knows? So I'm still going to ask. So, Will, if you could have other people describe you in 3 words, what would you love those 3 words to be?
Resilient, strong, and I don't mean that necessarily in a masculine way, but strong, and welcoming.
Ooh, that is a new word.
Love that.
I get resilient a lot, and I love that as entrepreneurs, that's a part of how we want people to see us. But welcoming is new. I like it. So then the follow-up to that is, how do those 3 words, resilient, strong, and welcoming, how do they play a key role in the core message that you have for people?
We are in a time of unprecedented chaos. That's almost like saying, oh, it's raining and the water is wet. Like we all know this, but we're, humans, we like to reinvent ourselves, and often we do that on grand scale, and we seem to be in one of those times now. And so all the craziness that's happening, certainly the United States is driving some of it, but it's not unique to the US. There's just a lot of things. We've kind of reached the end of an era, and we're all in this place between the places, trying to figure out what's coming next. And so for my own work, and certainly for the work that I do with executives and entrepreneurs, so much of our skills are not things you're necessarily going to learn in an MBA program, although those are important. They're not even always just sort of core street skills. So much of it is really the way we talk to ourselves, and the narratives that we have, the conversations we have with ourselves about ourselves. And so really that's the key to resilience, is speaking well to ourselves. The key to strength is to really have a sense of resolve and a sense of mission. And I think welcoming it's just an underappreciated skill in our world right now. Everybody's dividing into these little camps. I'm with this person, I'm with that person. And the challenges we're facing as a people, as a global civilization, are bigger than any one camp can solve. And so the question is, how do we open our front door and welcome people in? I grew up in a big family, a Scottish family. We had this Scottish tradition called Hogmanay, which is it happens on New Year's Day every year. And you just open your home. It's like a welcome, an open house for your friends and neighbors, and people would drop by. I think we need a Hogmanay for the world.
How do you spell that so I can look it up?
I believe it is Hogmanay. It's one of those obscure Scottish traditions.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mike Myers has some joke about it somewhere in all the stuff he talks about Scottish people. But this idea of welcoming, we are so quick to say, I'm with this person, I'm with that person. But how would our own work, how would the world, how would our communities change if we sought commonality and we really invited people in to our spaces in a way that is open and loving and interested? Like, how do we become actually interested in the people around us?
It's funny you mentioned that, because Lisa and I were talking earlier about asking questions of other people that you meet, and how powerful starting conversation with a question can be.
Absolutely. So much, even in my own coaching framework, is question-based. So like, what are the questions that drive us? Like, one of the 3 questions I work with all of my clients on is, because oftentimes, especially executives are facing these things that they didn't expect to have happen. And so the 3 questions I teach them is, what can I learn? How can I be grateful? And how can I help? We live in a world where too many people have learned a belief in helplessness, but we're never helpless. And so asking those 3 questions allows you to position even the most difficult things as, oh, that's something the universe meant for goodness for me.
What if it's an easy thing? Does it always have to be a difficult thing to ask those questions?
I think it can be anything. And in many ways, it's really, in some ways, we have all these different phrases, like growth mindset, for example. The growth mindset is just assuming that you are in charge of yourself, you're capable, and that regardless of what happens in the world, you can do something about it, even if it seems beyond our grasp. The example I always give is of Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi death camps by scrawling notes in his on little pieces of paper and hiding them in his pajamas. And when he got out, he wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning. And the classic, the money quote from that is, the greatest human freedom, the one that can never be taken away from us, is the freedom to choose our attitude in any given situation.
I like that. I used to go into my daughter's school and I would teach them about emotions. They're like elementary school kids, right? So I think primary all the way up to grade 4, I think it was. And I go into their classroom one day and we start talking about relationships to emotions. And I told the kids that I had befriended fear. Yeah. They're like, wait, what? They were so confused. I don't remember where I was going to lead with that because I don't remember what you just said, but it was something about emotions.
Yeah, because we process the whole world from 2 different centers, our prefrontal cortex and our amygdala. And in our amygdala is all of that subconscious programming gathered over years. And we do actually very little out of our prefrontal cortex. In fact, if you think about flow state is how do I do more in the prefrontal cortex and less driven by these stories of fear or other kinds of emotions. But most of the emotions that we experience on a daily basis are simply emotions that are expressions of our programming. We learned something at some point in our life. We had a fear experience or a shame experience. And so we internalize those emotions, and really the question is, how do we become conscious of them? Carl Jung said, whatever we don't bring into a consciousness appears like fate. And so oftentimes we think, oh, that just happened. No, it didn't. Like most of what happens in our lives are the result of our beliefs about it and the way we approach the question.
So lately I've been reflecting a lot. I've been watching a lot of videos of Carl Jung, or how do you say it? Carl Jung? Carl Jung?
Yeah.
Jung? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
His work. And you said, oh, that just happens.
Yeah.
I want to write that down before I forget.
Mm-hmm.
So it just happens. The reflection for me was, I remembered what it was that I was focusing on and trying to manifest years ago. Yeah. And I'm finally seeing it come to fruition now. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, some of it already came to fruition before now, but I'm only now finally reflecting that I see that transition.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, oh, so it didn't just happen. I remember the patterns that I used to take daily then.
Yeah. And
I'm seeing the results now.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden I'm not feeling like I'm lost and stuck in the chaos that you mentioned at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some sort of control and I can choose my next chapter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we create the world by what we choose. That's age-old wisdom. Aristotle talked about it. We create the world the world is constructed of our choices. It doesn't happen because of parties or governments or businesses. I mean, all of those things, they play a part, but the world is just a large amalgam of all the choices we've made. And so if you want to change the world, make different choices.
We mentioned that earlier. I love the synchronicities. So we mentioned that earlier about the 4 ways that we fail: how we think, how we feel, how we act, and what it is that we believe. Mm-hmm. So then to create that impact, change those things, upgrade them. They don't have to be perfect, but upgrade them. Yeah. And I remember,
Can I add a 5th? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I would add a 5th, which is the stories we tell ourselves.
That would be belief.
Yeah, that could be belief. Yeah. But oftentimes we construct these narratives. We are story making creatures. That's what humans are. And so we construct these narratives. And even in often I'll be working with very high level executives. And yet some of the stories, when they're willing to be candid with me, some of the stories running through their head just seem crazy. Like, I can't believe some of these people, like these people have like MBAs from really great programs. They've been in C-suite leadership maybe for decades or more. And yet still there's these stories running around in our head. It's, you know, in the recovery world, we often talk about, remember the old movie line, like the caller is inside the house. Like, you know, you're always worried, like you pick up the line and then you find out the caller is actually on the upstairs extension. And that's true for most of us. And yeah, I guess that is an expression of belief, but it's a particular one because I find that even for myself, when I'm more aware of those stories, when I'm actually journaling them, you can't see it, but right now there's a pad of paper to my left. And whenever I have one of those stories, I just write it down. There you go.
I'm taking notes.
So I just write it down because again, going back to Jung, whatever we don't bring into consciousness, we feel like that just was fated to happen. Oh, you know, governments come and go, businesses rise and fall, like that's somehow just the fate of the world. No, it's the sum total of all of our decisions.
It made me reference a song, and so now I'm singing and dancing in my head. Oh, that's just the weight of the world. That was the lyric, not fate.
Yeah.
For some reason I was saying that's just the fate of the world. No, that's just the weight of the world.
Yeah.
Interesting. So remember what I was going to say about the kids earlier. And it ties in with what my daughter taught me. So when I was teaching the kids that I befriended fear, I also taught them that they can choose their emotion at any point. And they're like, what? How? Because they're so used to just being sucked in and they don't have the tools to emotionally regulate. So then I told all the kids, I was like, oh my God, you just found a winning lottery ticket. So if you give it to your parents, you won the lottery. Like, what are you going to do with your winnings? And all you see is the kids getting so excited.
Right.
And I was like, and you just chose that was true right now, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, like they got where I was going with it. I'm like, it doesn't matter what story I'm telling you. If you buy into it, you are choosing that emotion. So I'm like, I want you to think like emotions are stances. So I'm like, if I'm doing this to you and I say, I love you, believe me? And they're like, no. It's like,
I don't believe you. Exactly.
I don't believe you. So being able to choose your emotions.
Precisely. Yeah. And what's really interesting too is as our knowledge of mental health and neurobiology is growing, we realize more and more that these things that we thought, and I'm not necessarily an anti-medicine or doctor kind of crusader, but we're realizing more and more that these things we thought would help us feel a certain way, antidepressant medications and all that, they don't even begin to hold a candle to the chemistry that we can create within ourselves when we're willing to make different choices.
Exactly. And it was my daughter that taught me that.
Yeah.
So I was in a bicycle accident, and when she was 17 months old, but when she was probably 2 or 3, somewhere in there, the toddler age, she comes up to me one day. I come home from work and she's like, Mommy, how was your day? I'm like, oh, fine. Yeah. Well, she got mad. She was expecting something like so big. She was like, so she reaches into her pocket. She pulls out her fist, and I'm expecting acorns because she's in daycare and she always was full of acorns. But she opened her palm and it was empty. I'm like, what? She's like, it's a cookie. It's a good day cookie. Eat it. And she shoved it in my face. So, of course, you go around like you have to, like a parent. And then she started smiling and giggling. And then I started smiling and giggling.
Yep.
And she's like, see, now you have a good day. And I was going to get mad. I'm like, who are you to tell me that some imaginary cookie will just light switch me into a different emotion? Yeah. And then I realized, no, she's right.
Yeah.
She's not even in school yet. And she knows that you can choose your emotions. She just didn't know how to verbalize that to me.
Yeah. 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 Wow. And we, it's interesting because we know this from human development, like in in the early years, we're developing this subconscious programming. So we're not as aware of what we think we're supposed to think. And so in some ways, so many of the world's religions have an idea of like returning to the childhood or approaching things like a child. And I really think that's the heart of it, is how do we unlearn all the things we thought we learned and just get back to the simple wonder of saying, what is this, and how can I conceive of it? Because I mean, like, I remember when my daughters were growing up. My daughters are well into adulthood now, but when they were growing up, playing Tea Party, they'd be sitting around with their stuffed animals, and they would have the little plastic cup and pretend to be sipping out of it. Well, they didn't care that there wasn't actually tea in there or there wasn't actually cookies. They were able to understand, oh, this is the reality I want to create. And I think if we could recapture some of that as adult humans, I think it'd be magical.
I think that's called Dungeons and Dragons for my fellow gamers.
I can see that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But again, I mean, the world is constructed the world is created, I should say, reality is created by our thoughts and by the way we, the way we think about problems goes back to the questions we ask. It really just comes down to being curious and interested and not thinking we know the answer, but going through life as a seeker.
What got you into this work? Stereotypically, we're going to generalize again. We're kind of playing with this all day long. Stereotypically, men don't usually talk about emotions. So, tell us, how did you fall into this work? What inspired you?
Yeah. So these are relatively recent turnings for me. So when I was in my early 50s, I had a life crash. I was caught up in cycles of addiction. I couldn't figure out how to get out of my own way. And it really took that, you often hear about rock bottom moments in recovery stories. It took that rock bottom moment. And the net was, I ended up having to spend 5 weeks in jail. I got out and I was so just unhappy with my corporate life that I knew I needed to begin to construct my own reality. So I said, well, I'll create my own, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to take a more active role in coaching executives and entrepreneurs instead of doing a lot of the corporate consulting that I've done. So I launched my business with all the amazing hope one could have in March of 2020. And of course, you know the rest of the story. Within a few weeks, the whole world shut down for COVID. And so I am now, in the process of trying to build this business and in the process of trying to rebuild my life and trying to figure out what's the key for me here. And I learned, first of all, the part of the key for me was service. How do I be of service? So I was able to just find ways to serve people during those early days of COVID. But the other thing I learned was this story of resilience, that, resilience really is the process of kind of rewriting our internal narratives, taking a position of radical self-ownership, like I own my journey. But then, and people sometimes see this ironically, but then the third level is then leaning into interdependence, because when we are more confident in ourselves, we can begin to build teams and relationships with the people around us, because we don't have to be good at everything. I can tell you, I'm good at about 3 things. Like it's a pretty short list. Thankfully I'm kind of deep in those things, but I don't have a million skills. And no CEO would. Like I always ask people, imagine if you walked into the Apple headquarters and some guy came up to you and said, "Hey, can I take your coat? Can I get you a cup of coffee?" And then you realize it's Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. Your first response was, surely, Tim Cook, you've got something better to do. And yet we think when we are in the CEO of our own life, we're supposed to be able to do everything. And in that process, I learned really those 3 steps, which is, how do I start to change my beliefs, to rewrite my internal narratives? take a position of radical self-ownership, and then how do I lean into interdependence and believe in the goodness of the people around me and in the talent and the skill of the people around me. I'm not the best at everything. I'm good at a few things. So to succeed, I'm going to bring other people into my circle. And so that was really the process for me, learning that process of resilience. And that's the core of my work on resilience is really those three key elements. Because I sometimes we call them learning labs through executive seminars. But I do these learning labs and we call them "You Are the Chaos." And we do that on purpose to be a little bit in your face, because so often we think like the problem is somewhere outside of me. It's somebody else. It's my team. It's the market. It's who's in the White House or in Ottawa, or who's whatever, who's leading the market right now. No. The chaos is what we create within ourselves, because we just have millennia of history to suggest that when we are able to own our own story, our own attitudes, our own perspectives, our own beliefs on situations, then we can succeed in any situation, even the worst and awful, the most awful world events. We have all these stories of resilience because people were willing to do the work.
Yes. I want to shift the conversation a little, because I could play here all day and you know that.
Yeah.
But what we haven't really touched on a whole lot today is how people have decided to share their message. So you're obviously on a podcast. Do you like podcasting? Like, is speaking something that you've always seen yourself doing, or is this kind of new for you?
I love podcasting. So I started my podcast a little bit about 3 years ago, took a little bit of time off as I was transitioning to a new location, but have been actively podcasting again since January. I love it because I get to, so I often work with this idea called green lights. If you've heard of the Japanese concept of ikigai, it's the same idea. It's kind of like what I'm good at, what other people have told me I'm good at, and what I get spiritual energy from. And that third part is really important. And so I mentioned questions before. I love questions. Like you can't see it behind me because it's on a lower shelf, but there's a whole section on my bookshelf which is just how to ask good questions. It's about 7 or 8 books on how to ask good questions. And so I love questions, and I'm really curious. So every Thursday I do a guest interview, which is where I get to ask really great questions. And then every Monday I do an episode myself, and it's usually something that I'm talking about right now, which is often related to either resilience or the idea of slow change, like the idea of that we really need to lean into the work of change. Nothing significant is going to happen in 5 steps or 30 days. You can see some really great starts for something, but so the podcast gives me an opportunity to sort of operate in 2 of those green light areas. And then I also write a Substack. So I publish between 3 and 5 articles a week on Substack. Again, very similar on very similar themes.
I was just about to ask, what's Substack?
Oh, so Substack is a blogging platform. I used to, so I was one of the early bloggers. I think I launched my first blog in 1999. It was called Will's Head, which now just seems goofy, but, and I had this graphic where like my skull would open up and there was these ideas coming out. So I've loved the idea of blogging, and just, I was on the internet pretty early on, from the early 80s on. So I've been sort of a resident of the internet and blogging there. I think what happened for a lot of us is that some of the social media platforms got really toxic. And so tools like Substack have become a platform where you can just share your ideas, get the ideas out there, begin to build community around those ideas. And for me, it's a great discipline because I love to write. But, in between finding ways to get sort of formally published with books and chapters and all that, Substack gives me a really good opportunity to just, okay, let's put out 1,000 words or 1,200 words on whatever, on this particular topic. So it's, I'm publishing on Substack 2 to 3 times a week. And then of course, LinkedIn is actually, I really consider that a writing exercise. So I'm writing on LinkedIn pretty much every day.
Nice. Did you always think of yourself as a writer, like before the internet? I guess before you use the internet, did you see yourself as a writer?
I think so. Yeah. Or a communicator, probably more accurately. So, I'm not particularly religious anymore, but I was, and I actually preached for the first time when I was 15 years old. So here's this kid, like, who knows? I don't even remember what I said, and it was probably not that great. But I've, going back to this idea of green lights, I love this idea of communicating to people. It's why I became a teacher as well. So I taught at the college level for a number of years, because I just love that process of asking, how can we take a complex concept and make it, communicate it well, make it graspable by people. So, yeah. So I think of myself more as a communicator, and writing, podcasting, blogging, LinkedIn posting. Those are just outlets for who I am.
So what you're telling me is you're good at everything. That you had no issues. It all came naturally. Is that actually true? No?
I wish, oh my goodness, I wish there was that genie's lamp you could just sort of rub and everything would work out for you. But no, it's difficult. And I mean, it's not surprising. There are as the internet has grown, as enabling technologies have grown, there's just more people talking now in the public square. I mean, it used to be I don't talk about this a lot, but my first career was in politics. And this was in the 80s and early 90s. And so, getting people's attention was difficult. You had to do really outlandish things, and really it was difficult to wake people up to the issues. Now it's almost the opposite, which is there's so many people talking about so many different things that finding an audience, finding a community, creating a community is a different kind of work than it used to be. But I'm not complaining, because I've seen tremendous growth, and I'm really delighted with the readers I do get to engage with.
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about the difference between active attention, which is having many people very overwhelmed right now with a mass of information, and then passive attention, which feels much more gentle, but doesn't have the same impact right away.
Right. Precisely.
There's a big difference. Yeah.
It's a sign of the times that one of the most popular songs I've heard recently is Unfollow the Noise. It's a pretty little song. And it's just so, what you were just talking about, Will, there's so much to hear now, so much to read, so much to participate in.
Yeah.
Where do we find our lane? Where do we find something? Do we even know what our green lights are? And if we do, are we clocking them the way you do? I podcast because it clicks 2 of my 3 green lights. You knew that automatically. So your self-awareness is demonstrated, and your resilience, of course, from everything you've said. But I wonder, how do others start to have that internal dialogue to find out what their green lights are?
So the exercise I use on a regular basis with myself is one I have all my coaching clients do. Is something that I borrowed from Stephen Covey. If you remember 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, sort of the classic, one of the classics. Yeah. And Covey talks about the importance of writing our obituary. And I do that. I do that every year. Every December, I write my obituary, and then I write a letter from my 3-year future self. So in December of 24, I wrote a letter from my January 1st, 2028 self. and said, what do I want to create in the world? What matters to me? And I think because there are so many people out there creating content and sort of, trying to build their voice, it is more difficult, I think, to both of your points. Like, it's more difficult to have an authentic voice. Like, if I just want to be a 5 steps to this and a 10 steps to that kind of content creator, that's just a formula and you can follow it. But having meaningful dialogue, I think, is really important. And I also think, so this is a little, this might be, what's the word I'm looking for? Overly optimistic. I don't know. But, so sometimes when we talk about Steve Jobs, one of the things that we talk about with Jobs was that he practiced what we call latent market demand. So Jobs looked out and he said, oh, there's this, there's this, there's this. We could put them together and create this thing, first of all, called a iPod, and then the iPhone and the iPad and all the I things. But in many ways, what made Jobs successful, in addition to being surrounded by really brilliant people like Tim Cook and Johnny Ive and all that, was he was able to look out and see, okay, where is the world going and how do we prepare them for the world that's going to be, not for what's out there. And in some ways, I think that's like, if you were to divide the market into two, not that it's clean or neat like that, but on the one hand are people who just want to be a content creator. They want to have followers, and there's nothing wrong with that. Oftentimes that's a really great source of revenue and all that. But I think there's a growing group of us that are asking the question, how can we be better ancestors? Like, how can what I do today affect the world that my great grandchild will live in? And that's where I think that's where I think a lot of the deeper conversations are coming from. They're not to your point. Yeah, they're not as quick. Like, you can't grow an audience rapidly by talking about deep concepts. But when you find those, I love the tech writer Kevin Kelly. He talked about this idea of 1,000 true fans. That really all you need is 1,000 true fans, and if you have them, and they'll buy the phone book. Like, think about somebody like Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss could read in a 40-year-old New York City phone book, and I would probably tune into that. I would listen to that because it's Tim Ferriss. And I think in the same way, there's a group of us, I'd like to put myself in that class, that are really saying, okay, I'm not going to get popular. I'm not going to be the cool kid quickly, but I think there's something really important we need to be talking about. And that's really the content that I'm trying to create.
Perfect segue into asking you, where do we find you? And of course, your favorite way to communicate.
Yes. So the best way to find me is to go to Will Samson, and there is no P in Samson, willsamson.com. And that's the jumping off point for everything. You can find me on LinkedIn from there. You can find the podcast. You can find the Substack. You can find out information about our upcoming learning labs. We are just starting to do retreats where we're really focusing on somatic work for executives, because so often executives, they don't need a new model for financial forecasting. What they need is to learn how to breathe properly, to understand meditation and the power of it, to understand the internal state. And so, yeah, willsamson.com is sort of the best launching point for everything that I do.
I think I asked you this before. Where are you originally from?
So I spent my earliest days in New Jersey. Then I have lived in the American Southeast since college. So
we're not related. That's what you're telling me.
I'm not related, nor am I related to the Scottish folk singer named Will Samson, spelled the same way, who tries to buy my domain every year.
Wow.
But I am of Scottish heritage. So my parents were both Scottish. I was first generation. And yeah, had a real great chance to grow up in the New York City metro area. But then, like I said, I've been really tempered in my adult life by American Southern culture and just the richness of it, the rich traditions here.
Interesting. So then I like to hold space at the end of an interview, just in case there's something on your mind or in your heart that you need to share. So what would you love to leave people with?
I would love to leave people with actually, and this, with the idea of, in fact, creating space. So much of our dysfunction is the belief that we need to act immediately on something. I read an article and then suddenly I got to do something. I got to post about it. I got to tweet about it. And I think when we are humble in regard to our place in the world, when we are patient, it's just all those sort of traits our mom tried to teach us. And when we create space for how we act, then I think we've got a greater opportunity to be resilient, because resilience is about understanding the right approach to whatever we're experiencing. Most of us are not living in fear situations. Some people are, and we need to be aware of that. But most of us, the thing we're afraid of is the guy who cut us off in line at Whole Foods. And so when we can learn to create that space and ask, like, even just some basic questions, like I mentioned earlier, but create your own, just like some basic questions that you can approach life with, I think there's incredible value in that.
So 2 asks of you. The first one is my own ask, because I'm creating a paid email list that's 30 seconds every Monday of passive attention. And the whole point is to ask self-awareness questions. Yeah. You said you love questions and creating questions. So do I. I'm known for my questions. I'd love to collaborate with you on getting some of the good ones started.
I would love that.
You credit. So, yeah. So that's my first ask. My second ask is, where do you see this conversation going? Both, where do you think it's going and where do you want it to go? Because that's more important.
I'm thankful that I can say that the answer is the same for both of those.
Oh, good.
So if we are at this epical moment, if I'm right, and I didn't come up with this idea. There's a really great book called The 500-Year Delta, which is where I got the idea that about every 500 years, humans reinvent themselves. If we're right, then all of the chaos, all the craziness we see is actually a marking of the end of an era. And so where I think this conversation is going is toward a sense of self-ownership, but toward a deeper sense of community, like true community, not, I commented on that guy's tweet, like a deep sense of community. And I think that's also what's going to be necessary is really finding new ways. A lot of the things that we counted on to hold us together, religion, government, things like that, those are losing some of their power. But the idea that we could be bound together as people by a common set of beliefs and hopes is still very present. And so that's where I think the conversation is going. And I think that's our greatest hope.
I love that. So I guess I will call that the official close to our main portion of the interview. So thank you so much, Will.
Thank you.
Now I do invite you to stay. Yeah. I do invite you to stay for the next 5 minutes or so, because we needed to make sure that was within time for the online TV stuff. But now is playtime. And I like to use this playtime as a bit of reflection of the conversation. Lisa, Excellent. If you need to take your dog out, I'm going to ask you.
You're freaking out.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you for just something that stood out, and then go ahead. Come back whenever you can. So, but
Okay.
something stood out.
Back in just a moment.
Yeah.
Puppy.
Yeah. I'm going to reflect back to you, Will. First off, I loved that you love questions. I love questions too. Did you, actually, I'm just going to remove Lisa for a moment. Did you like the intro question? I know you've heard it before.
No, I loved it. Absolutely. No, it's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you see all my subtleties behind it?
What's that?
I said, did you see all the subtleties behind the
I
question?
did.
I figured you did.
Yeah, I interview people every week. So yeah, I picked up on that, and I think it was magnificent.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
No, I liked when you said, I'm going to paraphrase here, but you said the CEO of your habits, or the habits of a CEO, sorry, versus being the CEO of your life and of your
Right.
habits.
Mhm.
That comparison made me really think about how am I don't want to use the word training. How am I focusing on my life? How am I going about, I guess, for lack of a better term, my life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And just like the CEO at any company, we are never going to be good at everything and shouldn't be. Because in order to develop proficiencies in some area, you have to stop being other things. Like you're probably not going to be, a good basketball player and a good wrestler because those sports happen at the same time. And I mean, maybe I'm sure there are exceptions, but and I think in the same way, like for a variety of reasons, our programming, our family of origin, but there also just seems to be something almost genetic in us. If you look at like spiritual typing models like the Enneagram, for example, that we almost seem to kind of come out of the womb in a certain way. And so if, to me, and I actually got this idea from Lisa Nichols, actually, is, our best use in the world is the things that give us the most energy. And if something doesn't give us energy, it's probably true. There is someone else that does get energy from doing that thing. I know, like for me, when I was building my business, I was sitting there complaining to myself one day about like, creating all these graphics for social media, not my favorite thing. And then a friend said, well, maybe somebody else really likes doing it. And so I found somebody who did, and I hired her, and she's amazing. And so it's a belief in the goodness of the universe and the goodness of us individually, that each of us gets value from different things. And when we put them together, we can create a beautiful world.
I used to do reflective ceiling plans specifically because they required a lot of coordination and nobody else liked to do them. And I'm like, they're my favorite because they required all the coordination. So Will, what's something that stood out to you during our conversation today?
What's something that stood out to me? Well, I appreciated the depth of your conversations. I never know, where conversations are going to go, and I've certainly been in my share of interviews where it was, what's your favorite color? I mean, it wasn't quite that bad, but I really appreciated the depth and the way you were able to sort of keep synthesizing throughout the interview. So that was very powerful.
I find my biggest struggle is I want to go so many different places, but there's never enough time. So I'm just like, I gotta pick one.
Absolutely. I experienced that as well. In fact, I do pre-interviews for my podcast now because otherwise they would be 5 hours long. I would just keep asking questions and go on forever. So really being able to put some limits around it that are oriented toward a particular theme is really important.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you again, Will, for being here. Thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
And my co-host is back. Lisa, just give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Awesome. And our next guest is here. Alka, just give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Awesome. Welcome. Look, everybody came back at the same time. It was great. Can you hear us, Alka? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. And then we can see and we can hear you. Great. I like to start off each interview a little different because I want to get to know you as a human being first. So I have this question. Here, let me change pens again. There we go. If you could have other people describe you in 3 words, what would you love those 3 words to be?
I would say I'm compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
I'm empathetic, and I'm driven.
Compassionate, empathetic, and you said driven?
Yes.
Okay, the only other pre-programmed question here is how do those three words, compassionate, empathetic, and driven, how do they play a key role in the core message that you have for people?
Absolutely. It plays a key role because as women, we always are striving to be that best version of ourselves. And by understanding one another, so being compassionate, being empathetic as to like how other women, how what are the struggles or challenges that they are going through, that I can help them, I can see that, and I can help them navigate. So yes, I'm compassionate, I'm empathetic, and I'm driven not only myself, but I'm driven to helping other women to also strive for the excellence and to be that best version of themselves every single day.
Ooh, striving for excellence.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about very generic roles today. We're being very generic, just putting that out there, very generic. Stereotypically, striving for excellence when it comes to women seems to be such a struggle point. In your experience, what is it that we're thinking that is potentially holding us back from even wanting to strive?
Absolutely. So one of the key points that I see is that what holds some women back is that they don't believe in themselves. And if you don't believe in yourself, whether you're a single mom, whether you have a corporate job, but if you don't believe in yourself that you're able or going to achieve what you set out to do, then that is always going to hold you back. And I've experienced this in my life too, that when I would say I really want to be successful at this, but I would always hold myself back because I didn't believe in myself. So I think belief plays a huge role in how it really shapes us. It plays a huge role in what we endeavor to do, or what we set out to do. So if you don't believe in yourself, you will always hold yourself back from ever wondering that you could have achieved more.
How do we get to that point of believing in ourselves?
Yeah, 100%. Well, how you get to that point is you got to shift your mindset. And your mindset is one of the biggest challenges that we have, is one of the biggest toolbox that we have. If you change your mindset, and I can talk my experience because that was me 10 years ago when I never believed in myself. I always played small. I always stayed small as a result. And now, reflecting upon my life, Laura, I can clearly say that if I didn't shift my mindset and I didn't believe in myself, I wouldn't be here today sharing with you, because it has played such a huge role. So how you can do that, is possible to do that just by changing your mindset and say, yes, I can do it. I can achieve. I am worthy of so much more. So the more you reframe it that way, it's also about changing your narrative, right? So getting away from the victimization narrative, but into the more empowered version of you that believes in herself, that is strong, that is convicted, that knows exactly what she wants. She's driven and she goes after it.
Driven. That a friend of mine and I used to have this little array of steps out of it. So you start as the victim, and then you're like, okay, stuff's happening, but now I'm the survivor. Yeah. And then once you're the survivor, many people just stay there. Mm-hmm. What ends up happening is there's these other steps, like you're championing.
Yes. Yes.
Where now you're not just like, I survived. you want to go out and share your lessons. You want to be the face of a movement. You want to stand up for a cause and be an advocate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So
Yeah.
you're not just surviving, you're one better, you're thriving. You're thriving, you are doing excellent in your job as a mother. You're doing excellent. So you're thriving every single day. And that's one of the beautiful parts of, as human beings, we always have that choice to either we want to elevate and excel and keep on doing the best that we are doing every single day, and to becoming the best version of ourselves every single day as a mother. That's one of the hardest jobs that we have, but we want to always keep on doing and striving and saying, yeah, I'm so good at becoming a mother. I'm so great at what I do. Or you're so great in your corporate job as an executive. You're amazing. People always want you. So you are thriving every day. And that's one of the biggest benchmarks that we always want to see, that measure, where we were maybe 5-10 years ago, we were surviving. But now, as we reflect upon our lives, we are thriving. And that is beautiful to see.
So you mentioned it twice.
I
What
did.
happened like 10 years ago? Tell us the story behind it. Why do you do this work? Why is it important to you?
It's very important to me because, 10 years ago, it goes back actually when I was a teenager, when I was in my teens, when I was 15 years of age, I was bullied. And that bullying continued every single day of my life. And I felt so disempowered at that time. And I never had the freedom of expression I never complained to anyone, but I allowed it to happen. Then there came a point in my life where I said enough is enough, and I voiced my opinion, and I got them expelled. Fast forward, after that, in my 20s, the late 20s, that same person, I felt like a caterpillar trapped inside a cocoon. And this is actually in my book. My book is From Cocoon to CEO, Living the Life of Your Dreams, forwarded by Les Brown. And my book exemplifies my story. I was a caterpillar trapped inside this cocoon, sheltered from and protected from the outside world, that I was seen but not heard. I was not allowed to express myself, how I felt. And that, again, disempowered me for so long in my marriage. And then, but there always comes a point, Laura, that we have a choice. And
can I ask a question? You said you were not allowed in several instances.
Yes.
And I just wonder, because one was when you were young, one was when you were seemingly more successful and older. Who was it that was not allowing you?
That's a great question. Well, who was not allowing? First of all, as a teenager, who was not allowing was the girls that were bullying me. Then later on in life was my ex-family would not allow me. Everything that if I felt any pain or anything, it was almost subdued under the carpet. No, it doesn't matter. I was almost like a Cinderella, shoved away, so it was sheer isolation. But that isolation, we all have a choice. As I said, we have a choice to how we want our lives to turn out. Either we can stay in that victim mode for the rest of our lives, or we can say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not accepting this. I'm not tolerating this. So you have a choice, and you can get away. You can do and make your life the best you can. So I would always encourage women, no matter what your traumas, no matter what the adversities that you were going through, always know that you have a choice. You have a choice. And when you have that choice of, you're surviving because you got away from that relationship, you have a choice. And now you are rebuilding yourself. So thank you for that question, Lisa. But yeah, we all have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Hawaiian brother who tells me all the time, Lisa, we have choices. We wake up and we decide every day. Am I a
Yes.
victim or am I a warrior? Who am I
Absolutely.
today?
Mhm.
And I can't help, every time you say that, I hear his words resonating in my head, because it's true. During some of the toughest times, we do have to almost force the decision,
Yes.
because otherwise, not actively deciding lets us slip into the one we probably least want to be
Mhm.
affiliated with in the moment.
Exactly. Because you know what? We get into that comfort mode, right? We get into that comfort mode. Oh, well, I'm okay. Oh, you know what? It's okay if I don't need to do this. So we feel comfortable. But it's that comfort that can be dangerous.
Yeah, you bring up another great point. Danger in comfort, right?
Mhm.
Find comfort in uncomfortability is what they tell us now. We ought to be doing. And what you're saying has so much serious implication in healthcare. I've heard doctors that I've coached with say that it's just one of the frustrations they have. They'll get through a deadly illness with someone, come out the other side, they've survived, it's been great.
Yeah.
And before very long, they're coming back. And it's a different version of the same disease, a new illness, something's going on. And they're realizing, even as medical professionals, they've attached their identity to this illness.
Yes. Mhm.
And once the illness is gone, if we don't quickly fill that void with a new version of who we are, who we claim to champion ourselves to be, then the old one kind of gets a little hooked in there, and then it bobs and weaves, and before you know it, it's got a blanket in there putting the kibosh on anyone who
Mhm.
wanted to come forward, right? And so it's an important message that resonates over so many fields, how we feel about ourselves and what we're willing to claim as our inner warrior, or however you want to put it,
Mhm.
driver, resilient person. Yeah, how does all of that bake into the cake of where you are now?
Oh wow, that's a great question. Well, how it all sort of fits into my life today. I can honestly say that, reflecting upon my life, all the struggles that I have gone through, your struggles, your setbacks make your comeback even stronger now. Your setbacks is your comeback to becoming stronger, to becoming a better version of you. And when I reflect upon my life, it's those experiences and how that all gets mixed into my life today is that, I've never given up. I've never given up. Even during those darkest moments of my life, during a divorce, I never said, why me? Why me? But I knew at the back of my mind that, with the hope and courage that led me to move forward in my life to create a life of success, it was only because I believed in myself. Laura, there's that word again, believe. You got to believe that, yes, at the end of, the tunnel, as it were, there is a light. And, so with that hope and the light that allowed me to carry on, to see that path, that yes, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be okay. So I encourage every woman to know that it doesn't matter what your circumstances, doesn't matter the adversity, it doesn't matter what the challenges you are going through. Know that is going to be okay, but it can only be okay if you believe, yes, you're going to be okay. You're going to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But if you're going to stay in the other narrative of being a victim in that mode, then I'm sorry, but nothing will help you. But you got to help yourself get out of the funk that you're in and say, I'm going to thrive.
I might be getting you to say the same thing again. Not sure yet, but, or I guess, and there are many people who feel very overwhelmed
Mhm.
with life, with all the noise, all of the stuff and things. And I know that also in desperation mode, it's very hard to see the logic and believe in yourself, upgrade your thoughts, all that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
True.
What
Yeah.
kind of advice do you have for people who are in that space where they do need help, but sometimes seeing what it is that they need to do is a little more difficult?
Absolutely. Sometimes, I always like to say, and Les Brown talks about, when you're in the picture, you can't see the frame. When you're inside, you can't see outside. And to be able to, and that's a great question. It's like, how does anyone come out to see the outside when they're inside and they're stuck? Like I was in that cocoon. I was in that cocoon that kept me sheltered, protected. But there's that word again. But yeah, it's all kind of related together. When you're inside, how do you begin to see the outside world? And then how do you begin to gain the confidence? So I will say it's the confidence that allows you to go beyond, to see the outside world. Because if you lack the confidence, you lack the self-esteem, you're lacking your self-worth. And I know for your viewers listening might be thinking, well, I'm going through this challenging time, and I feel so alone, or I feel all the emotions that one goes through. But your self-worth really diminishes when you are going through those difficult times. So the only way, like in my example, when I was in that moment, I had the hope. When you have the hope, at least you have the confidence to move forward. At least when you have the self-worth, you feel light, you feel confident, you feel better about yourself. And then for me, slowly, that's what happened. And this is what I can share with you, is that you need to have those stages in your life, what you need to do, how you get out of that funk that you're in, and really help yourself to see that, yes, you can see that. You can see the outside. You don't have to be inside that box or going through those difficult moments, but there is hope if you allow it to be.
So you mentioned that you help people strive for excellence. What does excellence mean to you when you're helping your clients?
Excellence to me means that you are on the right step. You are achieving, even though it's the smaller steps. And I always like to say, even having those small victories, it doesn't have to be a bigger victory that you have to celebrate, but celebrate the smallest victories. So when I'm coaching my clients, I always like to win with them. I always like to say, well, your smallest wins, wow, you did a great job. I commend you for doing what you did. And, so that's one of the biggest things, because then they begin to feel confident. Then they begin to slowly have that self-worth that once was diminished. So I celebrate with them to know and acknowledge. So this is how I know I can measure the excellence that they are achieving in their lives.
There was a few people recently who have not wanted to share some of the achievements and some of the fun stuff happening. Some of you watching, love you. And they would hide away. So sometimes it's a picture or a video. Like within bLU, we do all kinds of cool things. And I'm telling some of them, look, I love you. I want to celebrate with you. And you are denying me an opportunity to celebrate you.
Yes.
And to share in these fun, happy, uplifting emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that? Like, let me love you. And then sometimes they're like, oh, okay. But then, yes, just to your point, like celebrating those small things.
Yes.
Sharing it with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Really up-level your confidence. It can up-level your belief and your hope and your courage to keep doing it.
Yes.
Maybe celebrate on your own if you don't have that.
Have that support. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I was like, this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to celebrate yourself. You got to believe in yourself that, yes, you did great. So even no one acknowledges you. And that's one of the best things also when it comes to self-confidence, when it comes to self-esteem. Oh yes, Lisa. But yes, that's absolutely the case. Your self-confidence, your self-esteem comes from acknowledging you, and that's one of the first things that we need to do. Is to how do you acknowledge you when other people, the external, doesn't validate you, doesn't really acknowledge you for anything. But that doesn't matter, because if you have the confidence in you, if you believe in you that yes, I am great, I am worthy, I am awesome. If you believe in that, it doesn't matter about the external, whether the validation you get from your spouse or anyone does not matter, because what matters is you, and what matters the most is what have you accomplished. What are you doing that's great? What are you doing that you are on this path of that you are just doing fantastic. So you have to acknowledge you first, then the outside. If they do, that's a bonus, but if they don't, it doesn't matter.
So, Alka, what you're talking
Yes.
about is so fascinating, because just if you don't mind me asking, what is
Yes.
your niche and client base?
I'm so sorry.
What is the niche of your client base?
Oh, the niche is post-divorced women.
I didn't catch that. It cut out.
Post-divorced women.
Oh, okay. So you have a really clear niche. That's wonderful.
Yes.
It's not unlike what we work with when we're working with leaders. It's the trajectory is so close. So you're talking about progress and so on. And what we like to say is look at the team in terms of their progress instead of perfection. If you measure progress, then everyone can succeed, right? So the D
Yes.
players become a C, the C's become a B, and the A's don't get overtaxed doing what everybody else can't keep up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're working through that course, we also work with emotional intelligence. And it sounds like that's what I hear you talking about, but not really saying. And that self-worth getting balanced with that self-actualization of, the drive for meaning and pursuit of things that are maybe more impactful. And when that is so much stronger in us than our confidence, then nothing we ever do is worth celebrating. It's just another thing. Moving, right? We're moving out.
Wow.
But when our confidence or our willingness to at least say, I'm okay, right? I'm okay. I'm doing all right. If we can balance that with our drive for purpose and meaning and everything else, we feel pretty good about life.
100%.
But otherwise, we're tooling along so fast that we don't recognize our own accomplishments. And then sometimes as a result, we don't recognize other people's because it's not worth recognizing. You're still getting your paycheck, right? Great. Get back to work. Not very encouraging. However, if we can say that, so we say react to their being, not their doing, right?
Yes.
And that's what we do. I hear you saying that, Alka. When we're not allowing ourselves to feel good about ourselves, we're not recognizing our doing or our being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who did I have to show up as to get that done? That's the thing that should be acknowledged and recognized, not what you did. Hey, great job. All right, well, I'm not taking that home to my spouse. No one cares. But boy, the persistence you showed to get that task done despite all the challenges, really well done. That's different. You recognized who I had to be to get the job done, right?
Yes.
So it's the doing versus being sort of space that it sounds like you're working on, which is deep, meaningful work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. But that's 100%. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Fun stuff. And I'm curious, when you think about the client base that you work with, how long, in your estimation? I mean, it's like grief, right? And there is no real schedule. Oh, it's Wednesday. We're done now. Everyone feels better. What are we doing next week, right? No, it's not like that.
Yeah.
So this is like that. Divorce is like a death, some would say. How do you get through those fine points and support them getting to the other side? Is that more of a consulting, more of a therapy role, a mentoring role, coaching? Do you run the spectrum?
It's more coaching, yes. It's more coaching. And that's a great question, Lisa. Thank you for asking. So what I do is through the coaching, I always like, before I have that one-on-one discovery call, during that discovery call, I sort of ascertain as to like, where are they on their journey? Because I think that's very important to know. My journey was different and everyone else's journey is going to be totally different. So I always ask them, where are they on their journey? And then how I begin to help is to know, okay, so if this is where you are right now in your journey, you are stuck in that relationship, and then I will say, okay, well, the confidence, what you need to do, and it comes down to rebuilding your identity. And that's one of the first things, rebuilding your identity, reclaiming your power and authority. Because for me, that was totally just ignored. I didn't have no say, no expression, no nothing. And this is what I want women to know, that as you move into the next chapter of your lives, is we're going to help you to rebuild your identity. We're going to help you to reclaim your power and authority base, that now as you move into the next chapter of your life, it's going to be so totally amazing. You're going to be more fulfilled. You're going to be more authentic and live, with all the aspirations that you once had, or your, hobbies, your values that were just shoved away. But now you have this opportunity that I feel so greatly appreciate, that I can help them to get back into being that woman.
I love that. Do you have an exercise that you use with your clients? And I'll share one if you want, you can share one. And because these things are so powerful and so simple sometimes.
Absolutely. Lisa, yes, I'm in the process of creating. I do, though, have a virtual coming up August the 9th. It's called the Unstoppable Her event. And, I'm going to be hosting that. So you're welcome to come and join.
Right? How will people find you on that show? Where will they go to look for that?
Yeah, it's on my Facebook page, Unstoppable
Okay,
Her Facebook page.
Nice.
great.
I want to shift gears just a little, because we haven't played too much in this space today, about the different ways that you have decided to share your message. Do you write? Do you sing? Do you speak? Do you tell us all the different ways that you have
Wow.
decided?
Yes, I mean, I like to do all. I mean, I love to sing. I sing in the car. I sing my heart out. I sing, wherever I can. And I think that's one of the other ways also, when I talked about, the freedom of expression that I lacked in my marriage. I lacked not being able to express. I lacked this and I lacked that. Now it's my time to shine, and I will. I sing where I can. I openly now, you know what? If I'm at a church, at a mall, and if someone is singing, I will join them, because why not? You are unstoppable. So you do it and I do it. And that's one of the best ways. So I sing. Another way is I like to write, because that's another form of expression. But whatever way that you can find to express yourself, do it. Do it. It doesn't matter if no one is watching. You owe that permission to you to do it.
You just summed up everything that I'm trying to get out of you for this part.
Okay.
Because the whole point about asking the different ways is, for one, you to celebrate yourself.
Yeah,
Have us
absolutely.
celebrate you. But then also to show the people watching that are in awe of, like, oh my God, Alka's showing her message, and Lisa and Laura are too. But I'm not a speaker. I could never see myself on a stage.
Mhm.
I don't think everybody understands that most of the time, those speakers, those authors, those singers, those podcasters, that wasn't always something that aligned with them. They
Mhm.
weren't always good at that. So that's kind of what I'm hitting here is, you said that you love to sing. Love it. So do I. There's so many Blue Talks people that do. Awesome. And that you like to write. Were these things that you've already talked about the singing a bit, but did you see yourself as a writer, or was there tension there and you just got over the tension to start doing it?
That's a great question. With anything, Laura, doesn't matter what we strive to do, as I was explaining to Lisa, that, how I help the divorced women is everything that they wanted to do. They wanted to go back to school, but they were told, no, you can't do this, but you can't go back to school. So now they will do that. They will see what they wanted to do. And for me, I always wanted to be a dancer. I always wanted to sing. And then, so what happened, Lisa and Laura, I didn't tell you this story. So after my divorce, I found my butterfly. And when I'm talking about butterfly, I became that Madam Butterfly, because one day I was coming home from work and there was a dance studio. Is that a sign? I saw a dance studio. I walked into that dance studio and I spoke to an instructor, and briefly he showed me the rumba dance, and I loved it. And straight away he signed me up for a competition. Laura, since 2004, I've been competing in Toronto, in Montreal, in the US. I was a butterfly that I was flying high, and I found who I was always meant to be. But that version of me, Alka, was always suppressed. And I'm so glad, as I was saying to Lisa, that, your experiences, your trauma, your adversities, it doesn't matter, because those are experiences that makes you who you are, and you are shining. You are a woman that is unapologetic. So I'm so grateful. I began competing and I loved it. There was some highs of my life since 2004.
And the energy of that sentence was like, ooh, I hit a sweet spot. Yes.
You did.
But I like that you're also showing us that it's the typical is the speaking, the podcasting, and the writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to highlight, you can sing, you can dance, you can write poetry, you can do artwork. Like, there's so many ways to express yourself. You can ride a unicycle, juggling, I don't know.
Anything.
Whatever it is that aligns with you, find that.
Mm-hmm.
Weave your message into it. I love that. So I'm going to ask you a fun question, and then we'll go into how we can find you. If there was a way that you haven't expressed your message yet, that you would love to, even if it was crazy cool and you think it's impossible, we're going to use a genie in a lamp or a light switch. Okay. So just automatically it's going to work for you.
Right.
What would you love to do next to express your message?
Wow, that's $1 million question. What would I do next to express? I would say just belt your heart out, whatever that looks like. Belt your heart out, no matter where you are. And for me, the best way that I can share with your audience is to be in front of a mirror or speak to a phone. And that's one of the best ways that you can learn to become confident. It really does help. It's one of the tools that I used very early on. I still do, actually. I still do. I look at myself on the phone, or I'm looking in the mirror and I'm singing. It is so good to have that confidence that we talked about, so that you have that self-worth to go out, whether you're at a church or in a mall and someone's singing, you're going to have that confidence to sing with them, or you're going to have the confidence to speak. If you're asked to speak, like, I heard someone, people say that, don't get ready, be ready. So whenever that opportunity comes knocking for you to stand up and speak, you can speak anyway. When that opportunity comes for you to sing and you are in that environment, you can get up and sing. So that's one of the tools that I continually use today. I'm looking at my phone, I look into it, or I'm singing, or I look into a mirror and I'm speaking or I'm singing. So use the tools that's available to you to gain that confidence back.
I love that. Okay, so we're at the time now where I ask you, where do we find you and what is your favorite way to communicate?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at Alka Sharma CEO. And my favorite ways to communicate, I do podcasts. I love to speak. I have a podcast called Ask the Experts with Alka. And, that's one of the best ways I get to meet other entrepreneurs, learn their stories that I'm so grateful to learn from others as well. So you can find me on my podcast. That's one of my go-tos.
Sounds good. I'm getting back into the podcast, so I keep a list now of all the ones I'm going to go into. I like to hold space at the end of an interview, just in case there's something on your mind or in your heart that you feel like you need to share. So how would you love to end the interview? Like, what would you love to leave people with?
Absolutely. What I would like to share is to know you are worthy. Does not matter what the trauma that you are going through, you have experienced in your life, is to know you are stronger now. It doesn't matter your setbacks, you are coming back to becoming the next best version of yourself today.
Okay, now I have Kelly Clarkson in my mind. It doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
That's right.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. So sometimes I ask this question when we have extra time because I like the future pacing of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you could tell us a little bit about where you would love this kind of conversation to go in the future with the work that you do, what would you love people to start talking about that they're not yet, potentially?
Wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. What I would absolutely love, and what I do see for myself, what I'm envisioning, is I want to, what the work that I'm doing today with the post-divorce women is, I want to create chapters in internationally. Of course, got to start nationally, but I do foresee chapters happening so that women all over the world can take on, and they can start, so it starts to amplify. Women are just, supporting each other. Women are sort of getting together, high-powered network. But rebuilding your identity, Laura, is one of the key factors that women have to start to develop. And this is what I help them in, how you're rebuilding your identity. So one of the best that I do want my work to amplify is to create chapters just internationally, and just doing that, and even nationally, like, so many chapters so that women anywhere and everywhere get that support of, that they're not alone. And I think that's the most beautiful thing that can really happen.
Love that idea. That's really sweet.
Mhm.
Go Alka. Go Alka. Okay. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome. I will call this the official close of the main part of the interview. Well, thank you.
Nice to meet you, Lisa.
Now,
Nice to meet you, Alka.
yeah, so we do have about 5 minutes left just of the time slot. And then you are the last person that we are interviewing today. So you have the option of staying for the extra 10-ish minutes where we wrap up the whole day, and you can be a part of that. But if you need to go after the 5 minutes, we completely understand. But offering that to you if you so like. So at this point, I like to do a little bit of reflection. So I'm going to start with you, Alka. What is something that stood out to you during our conversation today?
What stood out to me was how we need to support one another, how we can rebuild our identity no matter the struggles or the adversities that we have gone through, and to know that there is a path, there's hope. At the end of the day, there is hope as to like how we need to rebuild the future going forward.
I love that. What about you, Lisa? What's something that stood out to you in this conversation today?
Just how incredibly thoughtful your niche is, and frankly, how many niches there are in coaching. When I joined in and became a coach over a decade ago, it didn't seem like there were as many as there are now. And now there is really coaching that goes across the board. And I appreciate what you're saying. There are these discrete populations to be served, and so many in the population that we can niche to that point
Right.
and do our best work, right? Our best and highest purpose. And so it's just a thoughtful reminder that you bring that there are more audiences probably than there are coaching niches still.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Good work.
There's a couple things that stood out to me. The first one is, I'm obviously paraphrasing here, but you're choosing not to accept lower standards. That is a conscious choice of standing up for yourself, where it doesn't have to be big and scary and aggressive. You're just like, this is too low for me. I cannot sustain myself here. I have now chosen to at least meet my minimum standards and potentially more. And I bring that up because the building code is much the same. The building code is a minimum standard.
Yes.
Not an ideal, not best practice, minimum standard.
Right.
So what are your own minimum standards?
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Okay. And then the other thing that I really took away was when we're building our confidence and when we're trying to get some of our worth back, to validate you first can be so powerful, even if you don't have a supportive team. So I'm loving all of that.
Right. 100%. Yeah. Validate you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many more. Like, where are you going on your journey? Rebuild your identity, reclaim authority and power. And then when you said belt your heart out, I was like, ooh, you get me. When I sing, I belt.
Me too.
And
I'm a
so you
belter.
should.
Yeah.
And setbacks as comebacks. I always find that too. Whenever there is a tragedy, and in life and even in our professional worlds, when something happens and it is too much or it's too big or too a lot of things, what is it really we get to take away from that? Because we first go into that little bit of victimness, right? Like, oh, this just happened, and thousands of my clients were being fired. Something like right before a coaching call. This was scheduled today, but now the agency just fired thousands. Can I still talk to you? You know, like this was happening in real time, live working with clients. And so the question is, how do you regroup? How do you pull things in? And in our world in coaching, how do we help them find that on their own journey without getting sort of consultative about it or giving too many answers or too much direction? But how do we go with them and remain in that sort of place of holding space for them to be able to really do that dive and emerge in sort of this deepened awareness about themselves and sort of that facilitate that next actionable step based on what they've learned about themselves.
Right.
And,
Right.
Yeah.
If I can, make a suggestion, one of the things that I have seen in myself, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to self-awareness. You know, do you have that awareness about you? So we need to start with ourselves before we can transcend to our clients as to what they need to do. And so this is so in my case, what happens that, when there comes a time that I'm overwhelmed, I wouldn't say stressed, but just overwhelmed. There's, tasks, there's deadlines that, how do I regroup? Well, I have that composure, your composure, I stay grounded. And what makes me grounded is I with grace, I just have a smile on my face. Literally, I have a smile. When I have a smile on my face, this then allows me that when I feel disempowered, I feel light. I feel good about myself. And this is a tool that I use. Not to say that works with everyone, but in my case, that's what I do. So if I find that I'm overwhelmed with anything, how my composure, my physiology just changes. But I want it to change. I allow it to change. So when I allow it to change, I feel good. I feel light.
Thank you, Alka. So
Nice.
it's up to you whether or not you would like to stay for the rest of it, but we are going to wrap up the day. Would you like to join us for the next few minutes?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so usually what we do to wrap up the day is we do kind of what we just did, only now it's a recap for the entire day. So, Lisa, what is something that stood out to you during all of what we've talked about today?
Well, I would say that what I'm learning, I'm going to take this personal. And so when I am on these podcasts, what I'm realizing is it's a conversation among really interesting people who have interesting things to share, like Alka and Will and some of the others we've talked to today. And there's no reason why I shouldn't start my own podcast quicker, as I was considering doing it. And I was saying, well, but there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of, and then it's like, but not really, because every time I've been on a podcast like this, it's pretty easy. Now that's happening because Laura in the background is making it very easy for all of us. We just get to sit here and say things, and she's working all the mechanics in the background. So thank you for that, Laura, making it seem so easy. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think my takeaway is that when you have really great guests, there's always a great conversation, and it flows naturally when you ask the right questions. So well done, Laura, and well done, Alka.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome. And I'm not sure how much you heard behind the scenes, Alka, but I'm still going to ask you the same question.
Okay.
And of everything, and it could not even be on the show, who knows? What is something that stood out to you today that maybe you would like to share?
Being around like-minded individuals always helps us to, really regroup, really empowers us to taking that next step forward in our lives, and to know that when we have the support of everyone around us, we can only thrive. We can only become better, do better every single day. And that's one of my biggest takeaways, is to, knowing that we have this support around us that really allows us to become better and do better every time.
So I'm going to switch it up. The next layer of this is, now that we've kind of done some recaps, what are some of the patterns that you've seen? It's a free game. Whoever knows one, just go ahead. Have you noticed any patterns today? Yeah.
I have, but Alka, would you like to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say the patterns perhaps that I've noticed is support. With support with you, Laura, hosting this amazing podcast, support of you, Lisa, the great question you asked me. And to know that, when you have the support, it's almost intriguing as to what can come about. So this is the pattern that I noticed.
What did you notice, Lisa?
I was noticing that, similar, jumping off your point there, Alka, the best questions are often the best answers, because they're not giving anything that the person can't find themselves, right? The difference, I like to start coaching with explaining what is the spectrum of coaching. And so we typically do that. And on one end, there's psychotherapy, and then there's consulting. And consulting, I kind of go through all that. Coaching is more future oriented. It's very much like the psychologist, but instead of learning coping skills for traumas we're getting past and trying to rework and reframe an ending on, coaching says, well, it may have happened back there in the past, but what are we going to learn about ourselves in this moment? And how do we take that into the future as the newest version of ourselves, the best and highest purpose version?
Yes.
And what I heard as a thread that ran through all of our speakers is that no matter what walk of life we're in, no matter what job we're doing, no matter how we frame it, if it's personal or professional, there are all these threads that run to who do we believe we are on the inside?
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do we allow to get to the outside, maybe even as far as the frame? And do we ever step out far enough that we can see the frame?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
how deep is the search? How do we connect the dots across the realm of challenges or people or places? But so many of the issues are the same, and so many of the solutions are the same. And even the same question could be shifted slightly to hit 10 different targets. So it's
True.
a fascinating thing for me to observe.
So some of the patterns that I noticed, and I'm going to recap some of yours and share some extras, is that we talked about thriving a lot, excellence, our worthiness, the roles that we play, supportive environments, and of course our identity. And all of these things were weaved into our conversation. But I like to highlight them because it's so funny that usually there's a theme in all of the people, and it's not like we set it up that way. So I want to take this moment to close my book. I feel like Fred Penner right now. Pack up my stuff. I want to say thank you to my guest co-host, Lisa. I want to say thank you to all of our guest interviewees, I guess is the word, for all of you taking your time to be here with me. Thank you to all of our viewers live and on the replay. And of course, everywhere else that you see this. Mwah, to all of you. We so appreciate you. And just a reminder that this is only day 4. We have a whole other day and hopefully some more AC. So air conditioning won't be so hot. You can see the shines. So that we can come back tomorrow for more fun. I do want to focus a little bit more tomorrow on the ways that we share and maybe some fun tools, practices that we could do together. We'll see where the conversation leads. So this is your reminder, same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow. That's 10 a.m. Eastern until approximately right before 2 p.m. Eastern. We are on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And again, much love, and we will see you tomorrow. So I'm going to click the end stream and sing and dance as we go.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Notebook.